5:46, and I would like to invite the city attorney to report on a closed session.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With respect to item 8.2, the pending claims that were listed at tonight's agenda, there was a motion on item 8.2.1 to approve a settlement in that claim in the amount of $1,930.53. That motion was made by Vice Mayor Welch and seconded by Councilmember Mora and passed by a vote of 4-0. With respect to item 8.2.2, there was a motion made by Councilmember Mora, which was seconded by Vice Mayor Welch, to reject the claim, and that motion passed 4-0. And then with respect to item 8.2.3, there was a motion made by Councilmember Mora, which was seconded by Vice Mayor Welch, to reject the claim, and that motion carried 4-0.
Thank you. And there's no reportable action on all other items, correct?
That is correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. The time is 5:48, and I am adjourning the special closed session meeting. And the time is 5:48. I'd like to call to order this special study session of the Emeryville City Council. I've previously given the admonishment that this meeting is being conducted pursuant to exemptions to the Brown Act under Assembly Bill 361, and that this meeting will be conducted via video conference. Members of the public who wish to participate in this meeting who are joining us by Zoom can use the raise hand feature on the Zoom bar when I call for public comment. To give comment, if you're joining by phone, you can press *9, and that will raise your hand to let me know that you wish to comment on that item. If you wish to submit an electronic statement via comment card, you can do that by visiting the city's website and going to the City Council agendas page and submit electronic speaker card here, and the clerk will read your comment into the record, and it will be noted in the record for you going forward. At this time, I would like to ask if the clerk would please call the roll for the study session.
Councilmember Mora.
Here.
Councilmember Pryforce is absent. Vice Mayor Welch.
Here.
And Mayor Bowders.
Here. Thank you. I'll entertain a motion to approve this agenda.
I move approval of the agenda.
I second.
Okay, thank you. There's a motion by Vice Mayor Welch, seconded by Member Mora to approve this agenda. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Mora.
Aye.
Councilmember Pryforce is absent. Vice Mayor Welch.
Aye.
And Mayor Bowders.
Aye. Members, next is ex parte communications. Is there any ex parte communication that you wish to report regarding either of the two study session items? Start with Vice Mayor Welch. Do you have anything that you would like to report?
No, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Okay. And Member Moore, do you have anything to report?
No ex parte communications.
Okay. I have none to report either. Now is the time for public comment. Members of the public who wish to comment for an item not on tonight's study session agenda will have 3 minutes to comment. And Madam Clerk, would you please recognize Brian Donahue for 3 minutes? Good evening.
Okay, this is to start off with, well, I mean, maybe the whole comment is for our new city manager, Paul Budenhagen. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Budenhagen. Maybe you can correct me. Mr. Budenhagen, I'd like you to be aware that this meeting it constitutes a Brown Act violation, as have all the meetings for the last 3 years, approximately. And that is because when we attend these meetings, we're required to surrender our name or our identity, and the Brown Act provides that the citizens may be able to do public comment that is anonymous. But here in Emeryville, for whatever reason, I've been telling them for years now to fix this, and they have been unwilling to make it so that we can comment anonymously. You'll notice the mayor just used my name. He knows that because I had to surrender that when I got onto the Zoom platform. So it behooves you to fix this, Mr. City Manager, and I hope you can look into fixing it, and so having it so that these meetings can comport with the Brown Act's provisions that we can make anonymous comments. And then I wanted to tell Mr. Budenhagen, please correct me when I finish speaking on the pronunciation, that welcome to Emeryville, and I would like you to be aware that to start to abruptly show you what you've gotten yourself into, the vice mayor Courtney Welsh, 2 days ago, publicly called me a fuck boy on her Twitter account, in her public Twitter account, her campaign account, and a number of other attacks against me. And that's a particularly egregious attack to call a member of the public a fuck boy for a council member, really particularly egregious. But you should be aware, Mr. City Manager, that that's sort of par for the course here at the Emeryville City Hall. The council members routinely attack public commenters if the comments don't fall into line with personal views, political views of the council. So, for instance, the mayor has attacked me and many others many times, as have other council members since now departed. But just so you're aware, that's the culture you're coming into, where the public is allowed to comment, but will be attacked if the comments are not up to snuff according to the people on high, from their dais. And you might want to speak with them about this to see if we can make this more democratic and more, in line with the Brown Act, and more, just more friendly to public commenters. You might want to make some comments to the council, or maybe even have some sort of meeting about it, because it's really out of hand. Thank you, and welcome to Emeryville, Mr.
Thank you for your comment. And are there any other members of the public who wish to speak for items not on the agenda for this study session? Okay, seeing none, public comment is now closed, and we will turn to our study session items. We have two items. 6.1 is a study session to review the public review draft of the active transportation plan. I would like to welcome our planning staff and our consultants from Alta to appear to join us and give the presentation.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, council members. So yes, this is Navarre Oaks, and I'll just be doing a quick intro and saying that this is the last public meeting we're having of the draft. We started with the draft becoming available on Halloween of last year. It's gone to BPAC, it's gone to Transportation Committee, it's gone to Planning Commission. We had a public meeting last week. We're here tonight. We'll be wrapping up public comments at the end of this week, and then moving forward with the ATP. So Jeff Knowles from Alta and Lisa Shore from Alta are here to present, and all of us will be available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome Jeff and Lisa.
Mr. Mayor, members of council. Let's see, do I have the ability to share my screen?
I believe that the PowerPoint has already been shared.
Okay. If the clerk could go to full screen mode, please.
I can't actually do that in this setup.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, it's a duplicate screen.
I gotcha, okay.
So I put it into a
well,
PDF.
next slide, please. Well, again, it's my great pleasure to be with you this evening. My name is Jeff Knowles. I'm with Alta Planning and Design. I am the city's consultant representing this active transportation plan process. I'm joined by my colleague, Lisa Shore, who's been with the city every step of the way as we develop this. It's our pleasure to bring this to you tonight as a study council session item and get your feedback on this draft plan. My overview tonight, my presentation will go through the various chapters in this draft plan, an executive summary, the plan, vision, and goals. The third chapter is the status of walking, biking, and rolling in Emeryville today. I'll then go and outline major projects, programs, and policy recommendations. We'll talk about implementation and funding. I'll mention what the appendices include, and then we'll talk about next steps in terms of the process of moving from tonight's meeting towards adoption and then implementation by the city. Next slide. So the draft plan includes an executive summary, next. And at a high level, this includes purpose of the active transportation plan, to put it in context, what's in the plan, also talks about how this corresponds and connects with other citywide plans and regional plans. We talk about bikeway mileage and the cost estimates. It also puts into context some of the numbers in the plan. Over 12 engagement events held, 1,300 people participated in our engagement over the course of this draft plan development. We met with the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee 9 times, 10 if you include the one just to discuss the draft plan. There are 16.5 miles of new bikeways recommended in this plan, 5.3 miles of separated bikeways, which I think is a major paradigm shift in the previous pedestrian and bicycle plan, and 32 crossing improvements to make it easier for people to cross busy streets. Next slide. I wanted to also call out some major projects and studies in this plan. There are 3 major project areas that encompass a suite of different improvements for both bicycling and walking. The first in green is the 40th Street Multimodal Project, which is already moving through different phases of conceptual design. The city's received funding to move into detailed design and into construction. The Alameda CTC is sponsoring the San Pablo Avenue Corridor Project. That also includes separated bikeways through the city of Emeryville, and that's shown in purple. And then the third item here, the Emeryville Loop Multimodal Project, is one that's the city is seeking funding for, and it includes a dedicated transit-only lane, a dedicated bike facility, a Class 4 separated bike facility, along with separated intersections and improvements for people walking in this important congested area. In red are the various multimodal studies that need to be accomplished in order to identify a preferred alternative for the community. These are located on Hollis Street, which corresponds with funding that the city has received to look at bicycle and bus improvements. Stanford Avenue, which would need to look at the alternatives to create two-way bicycle travel on Stanford. Right now there's a portion that's one-way traffic only. Park Avenue, Christie Avenue, and the length, almost the entire length of Powell Street are also major study corridors. Next slide. In terms of bikeway mileage, what we have here are the different types of bikeway classes, and the columns are your existing mileage built today, what's proposed in this draft plan, and then the fully built network. I'll mention that these numbers don't add together because in some cases your existing mileage is repurposed or reclassified for different bikeway types. So this includes Class 1 shared use paths. That's, for instance, the Bay Trail or the Emeryville Greenway, where you have a complete separation from people walking and bicycling from motor vehicle traffic. We have 2.5 miles of new Class 1 shared paths proposed. Bicycle lanes, these are your standard striped bicycle lanes. There are no new Class 2 bicycle lanes proposed in this draft. There's a buffered bicycle lane designation, so adding a little bit of separation, painted separation between the bicyclist and motor vehicle traffic, 0.7 miles included. Class 3 bicycle routes are streets where it may be signed where the bicyclist is sharing the road with motor vehicle traffic. We have none included here. We have 2.1 miles of Class 3B bicycle boulevards, which would be traffic calm streets for people to mix with traffic. And then Class 4 separated bikeways. I mentioned this before, but this is really, I think, the marked departure from the most previous draft. The current plan, is 5.3 miles of new separated bikeways. Separated bikeways have a physical separation between bicyclists and motor vehicle traffic, and that separation could take the form of a planted median, concrete curbs, bollards, something that prevents the vehicles from blocking the bike lane or impeding the bicyclist. Multimodal studies, close to 6 miles of that altogether. So altogether, your fully built network includes 22.5 miles of bicycle facilities. Next slide. In terms of cost estimates, we pulled all this together in the executive summary. You have nearly 14.7 miles, $14.7 million of bicycle improvements, $1.2 million of new pedestrian improvements. That includes new sidewalks or enhancements to your current sidewalks. In terms of spot improvements, which would be at crossing locations, we have just shy of $7 million worth of new crossing improvements. And I should mention all these are in 2022 dollars, which could also increase due to the increasing cost of construction and inflation. Lastly, you have just shy of $1 million of new multimodal studies. Next slide. So it's important to set the broad vision for this plan. We wanted to make sure that we had good consensus among the community, among your BPAC, among the Transportation Committee, and various stakeholders in order to understand what we're trying to build toward. So next slide, please. We hope that these recommendations through programs, through policy changes, through projects, infrastructure projects, helps you build and achieve this vision. So this is a forward-looking vision. The city of Emeryville is a community where active, sustainable transportation is the easy choice. It is safe, comfortable, equitable, and accessible to all. We know that we're not there today, but we hope that this plan provides a blueprint for the city to go out and implement these recommendations in order to achieve that vision. The continuous connected network of world-class facilities eliminates the necessity of driving a car and makes active transportation accessible to people of all identities, race, ethnicity, age, gender, socioeconomic status, ability, or orientation. The city promotes active travel through infrastructure, education, and encouragement programs. The city inspires other communities with its visionary and forward-thinking commitment to active transportation. Next slide. That vision is supported by these various goals. And again, these are the goals that we have that we know we haven't met today, but we hope that this plan helps you meet in these various areas. We're hoping that the active transportation network in the future, when fully built out, is comfortable. We hope that it's connected. We hope that it provides a joyful experience for people that are walking and bicycling or rolling, that it's equitable, sustainable, and implementable. The plan goes into detail about what each of these are defined, and if you have more questions, we'll be happy to take it at the end. Next slide. Chapter 3, biking, walking, and rolling in Emeryville today. Next. In order to understand the needs, we went through a pretty robust public engagement process, but also equally an important objective data analysis process. We looked at current demographics. We looked at major destinations like employment centers and retail hubs. We looked at your transit locations, so that includes Amtrak, Emery-go-round stops, AC Transit stops. We looked at equity, where low-income workers live within the general area, people who are coming and working low-income jobs in Emeryville to make sure that they have connections as part of their commute. We looked at median household income. We looked at where you have existing bikeways, where there were gaps in the network, and also walking connectivity so that people could get from their homes to major destinations. We looked at bicycle and pedestrian-related collisions, auto collisions, so to understand your safety concerns. And then finally, we evaluated bicycle level of traffic stress. So these are streets that might feel comfortable or uncomfortable for people bicycling because of the high speeds, high volumes, or the lack of separation between themselves and motor vehicles. Next slide. Some of the key takeaways from this analysis were that arterial roadways crossings are stressful, particularly along 40th Street, Powell, and San Pablo Avenue, that there needs to be a focus area on San Pablo Avenue and Adeline Street. Walking routes can be improved by removing identified barriers. These are things that we've received through various public comments and through analysis out in the field, and that the existing bikeway network is not comfortable currently for all ages and abilities. Next. Chapter 4 is really when we lay out our recommendations for the city. This includes projects, programs, and policies. Next slide. So how do we develop the recommended biking, walking, and rolling network? It was based off that needs assessment that I just mentioned, safety, equity, comfort, and connectivity of your current system, and the needs that were required to meet those goals. Public input, the Emeryville Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, which has been, again, we've met with them 9 times through the course of developing this master plan, this active transportation plan. And next slide, this chapter then goes into more detail about each of these. What we proposed is an all age and abilities network shown in blue. This is when it would be fully built out. Blue includes all of the Class 1 and Class 4 facilities. So again, these are your shared use paths. Think about trails like the Emeryville Greenway and the Bay Trail, and separated bike facilities. So again, having a physical separation between motor vehicles and traffic. What we heard from the public and what our analysis showed is that this is a feasible thing to do to help connect people all across the city and overcoming some of those major barriers at intersections. We want to make sure that this was comfortable and connected, pedestrian network, and that intersection upgrades at arterial crossings in particular benefit people walking and bicycling. Next. We went into more detail in this chapter to show what each of those major projects includes in terms of the suite of projects. So I won't go into detail during this presentation, but this is all in the plan. You can see here for the Emeryville Loop, it's envisioned to be a suite of projects altogether, but the city could, based off of finances and assembling this, could take some of these on in piecemeal fashion. So for instance, project ID B17 in the plan talks about the Class 4 separated bikeway on Shell Mound Way. It has a start and end point. That could be completed as an individual project or pulled together as a comprehensive project. Next slide. The same could be said for 40th Street. We know that the city is already moving in the direction of having this as a unified, complete project, but there could be some intersection upgrades along the way, and so we wanted to make sure that that was included and captured here. Next slide. The same could be said for San Pablo Avenue as a major corridor. And again, we wanted to note some of those major intersection upgrades that either could be responsible as the corridor project moves forward, which is a multi-jurisdictional project, or projects that the city could carve out and take on as their own. Next slide. Multimodal project studies. Christie Avenue is looking at the trade-offs that would be required to create separated bikeways. On Hollis Street, I mentioned this before, but there's the study would look at the potential for installing bike lanes on Hollis Street as part of the transit street. Sidewalk and pedestrian improvements would be included in that. Howell Street, separated bikeway study. What would the trade-offs be required in order to fit a separated bikeway study? Most notably, what would need to be happen, or what would the traffic impacts be in order to include that? And also undercrossing improvements in coordination with MTC project to the Bay Trail connection. Stanford Avenue separated bikeway study. Bay Trail widening study. This is something we heard pretty loud and clear from current users on the Bay Trail, that there's the narrowness of the trail makes it really difficult, a lot of user conflicts, so looking at widening that, especially as you go out to the point. Park Avenue multimodal study, looking at reconfiguring your current angled parking on Park Avenue in order to create like perpendicular parking and also free that up to either widen the sidewalk or include bicycle facilities. Next slide. Some of the focus areas are separated bikeways, the Emeryville Greenway and Doyle Street extensions, and then leveraging street closures and shared use paths throughout the network. Next slide. This is our proposed biking and rolling network. The dashed lines here, the color-coded dashed lines, are the proposed network. So in green, you see our proposed Class 1 shared use paths. In the light blue are the bicycle lanes. In navy are the buffered bicycle lanes. Yellow are bicycle routes. Orange are your bicycle boulevards. Pink are your separated bikeways. And the red dots are your study corridors. We also have in the green dots are the trail rehab project, which is on the Bay Trail. Your solid lines should correspond with all of the different facilities above. The solid lines are your existing facilities. And again, we wanted to show this how the city connected to its neighbors in Berkeley and Oakland and corresponded to their vision for their bikeway network. Next slide. In terms of the walking network, the focus area were on, again, crossing busy streets on San Pablo, Powell, and 40th Street, and correspond closely with the city's general plan, which has pedestrian priority zones already marked out. And so we wanted to look closely at improvements in those areas. Again, the idea was to leverage street closures and shared use paths where it made sense. Next slide. So this is your proposed pedestrian network. Again, each project has a label that corresponds in the appendices to more information about the project, including the start and end points, the distance, and important notes. In blue, you have new sidewalk or pedestrian paths. In pink or salmon color, you have improvements to your existing sidewalks. You have your Class 1 shared use paths, which again can be enjoyed by people bicycling or walking, and then your study corridors. Next slide. Finally, in terms of infrastructure recommendations, we have spot improvements. Those are color-coded here and also labeled. We have new crossings, upgrades to your existing crossings, major intersection upgrades, which will include things like changing the geometry of different corners, creating protected intersections. In red, we have new traffic signals. In pink, we have undercrossing improvements, so you can see that one clearly. SP14 is at the Interstate 80 undercrossing to help make better connections to the Bay Trail. And then finally, signage. I will mention that as a separate parallel track, the city will be pursuing additional wayfinding strategy, and that's going to be moving with the BPAC, with the Transportation Committee this spring as well. Next slide. There are programmatic recommendations in terms of equity, education, encouragement, and evaluation. Evaluation recommendations includes not only continue to require developers to provide vehicle, pedestrian, bicycle counts, but also in the plan, it makes the recommendation that the city shall produce vehicle, pedestrian, and bicycle counts before and after each roadway project in order to evaluate the effectiveness of your investments. And so that's included in the draft plan. Next slide. Policy recommendations include commitments to high-quality bikeways, policies around how you're going to maintain your existing facilities and future facilities, safe routes to school, the evaluation and enforcement. Next slide. Chapter 5 is how we get this built, so implementation and funding. Next. It's important just to note the project delivery process and where we are. The city-wide active transportation plan is really a blueprint and wish list for the city. It includes every conceivable project that we think is feasible. The next step is really to go out there and finding funding. So the city, working through its capital improvement project budgeting process, will then prioritize projects together and go seek funding. So that's the first phase of budgeting. Then once you get the funding in hand, you go through a planning and engineering analysis phase. You develop a preferred alternative or final alignment. You develop a conceptual design. Then you go through a detailed design. You get through your environmental clearances. Then you move into construction and maintenance. And so I'd say we are even before number one on this project delivery process. So for members of council and the public, there will be public input at each one of these phases along the way before you see a ribbon cutting and before the city goes out to start maintaining a project. So all of this is important. We wanted to make sure this is clear that the ATP, the Active Transportation Plan, is really just at the very forefront of this project delivery process. Next. It also helps the city go out and achieve win grants, which we know are going to be critical in order to leverage your existing city dollars to install and invest in these projects that are all laid out here. So again, the full suite of improvements is just shy of $24 million in this plan. We think a large portion of that can be accomplished through local, regional, and federal grants. Next. So I just mentioned that before, there's a healthy amount through local and regional grants, state grants, and other state programs. We've not included any federal grants because of the cost to administer. At this point, we don't think that the city staff can take on major federal grants in terms of administering those. That being said, I still think there's a healthy amount of resources available to accomplish this through those grant programs I mentioned. Next. Finally, I'll just leave it here. The appendices are included in the plan. They're very lengthy. Next slide. The first appendix item is the Complete Streets Policy, your current Complete Streets Policy. And Appendix B is the public engagement documentation. It's not included as a chapter in the plan, but all the information is here as an appendix. It includes our strategy that we developed, the phases we went through, descriptions of all the activities we held, including a youth engagement program over the summer at summer camp in Emeryville, our workshop presentations, all the noticing materials that we held, flyers that we produced, social media campaigns, etc. Next slide. So the next steps. Next. We released the public draft on Halloween, October 30th, 1st, 2022. We met with the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee meeting on November 7th. We went to the Planning Commission on December 8th. December 15th, we met before the Transportation Committee. January 11th, we held our committee workshop. Tonight is our City Council study session, and then we will close the public draft comment period on January 20th. So again, the public's had since October 31st to provide comments. We hope to get more this week. We'll then meet with staff to incorporate, review, and identify which feedback will be moving forward into the next draft, which we will then hope to bring to you in May or June for hopeful adoption. Next slide. The last slide is, I think, just important for every member of the public who's joining us tonight. You can provide comments through the website at emeryvillemoves.org or by sending an email to info@emeryvillemoves.org. We're reading all of them. We've got a comment log that we'll be tracking all the comments so we don't lose anything. We invite everyone to provide their thoughts, their feedback. What did you like? What are we missing? All of that's going to be reviewed and taken into account. So thank you very much. With that, I will cede it back to the chair and look forward to answering any questions and receiving your feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff, and Lisa, and everyone at Alta for your support in bringing us to this point. And as you mentioned, we are accepting comments on the draft active transportation plan through January 20th. This time we'll call for public comment. A member of the public who wishes to provide comment on the active transportation plan draft at this study session will have 3 minutes to do so. Do we receive any written comment cards in advance of today's meeting for this item, April?
No, Mayor, we did not.
Okay, and this is the last call for comment on this item. Okay, I would like to recognize Brian Donahue for 3 minutes, please.
Okay, first off, as a preface, I would like to reiterate to Mr. Buddinghagen, the new city manager, you had a look of sort of maybe what could be perceived as incredulity when I told you the vice mayor publicly called me a fuckboy and other things. Just so for your information, I will provide all that information to you. I will send that to you, and then we can discuss that in private, hopefully in the not too distant future. Now moving on to the comments about what's in front of us. So there's nothing in this, notice the vice mayor is smiling. It is sort of funny, I suppose. It is a funny insult. I do agree with her on that. Anyway, so moving on. There's nothing in the active transportation plan about what went wrong with the bicycle pedestrian plan that we spent $200,000 on about 12 years ago. There should be something in there that addresses what did we not get accomplished, and a litany of the things we didn't get accomplished, a list, and also an analysis of what went wrong, so we can do a better job with this new plan, which I presume costs even more than $200,000. But that should be included. And I've been asking for this and not getting any response. Okay, the speaker was incorrect when he said we have 2.5 miles of bike boulevard existing mileage. We do not, just so the city manager knows this. We have much less than that because we know what a bike boulevard is in Emeryville, and that is a regulated street where the traffic has been regulated. And we only out of the 5 bike boulevards, we only have one, and that's the Doyle Street Bike Boulevard. All the other bike boulevards are not real bike boulevards because the traffic has not been regulated, because the city council refuses to implement the bike plan vis-a-vis traffic volume, the number of daily trips per day. They just refuse and haven't done their due diligence with traffic counts. They're supposed to do it biannually to check, and they're refusing to do that. But this active transportation plan takes away from transparency, accountability, and bike safety by erasing those metrics that the current bike ped plan has. This traffic count, and then this requirement to have less than than, for instance, 3,000 vehicle trips per day, and on most bike boulevards, some are 1,500. And then the current plan has a provision that if there's too much vehicle traffic, then it bumps it up to a higher level of what's called traffic calming. There's 5 levels. And this active transportation plan removes that protection for bicycle safety from what we currently have. So it's going backwards in terms of accountability, transparency, and safety. And there's nothing about that. I've been asking for this, and the powers that be are completely unimpressed with this idea of having measurability in the new active bicycle transportation plan vis-a-vis the bike boulevard system. We're no longer going to have measurability. That's wrong.
For your comment, are there other members of the public who wish to comment on the draft active transportation plan? Seeing none, public comment is now closed, and we'll turn to discussion. Recognize Member Pryforce.
Hello, everyone. Yes, sorry, just checking in. So first I want to say to Jeff and Navarre, thank you both for, you did a great job in presenting this plan to the public the last time I attended. And I think that the public comments portion, the feedback, I'd like to know, that's still ongoing, it looks like, according to the schedule. But so far, has there been any changes or anything that you're thinking about in terms of how to sort of address some of the concerns that are in terms of the feedback? So I have a question around that, like how's it been in terms of public feedback and response? And I know it's not done yet, but what are some things that so far that you're thinking about changing or altering in terms of the plan? In terms of, at that meeting, Brian Donahue posed the same question around the bike boulevard, and I think it would be good to communicate how the bike boulevard in terms of, I think it's like more sort of traffic calming, sort of low stress design. How is it different from Oakland or Berkeley? And if it's anything that we're doing different than what they have set forth. And if we're not doing anything different, then, and if those things have worked, then the metrics or the measurability that Brian Donahue speaks to may not necessarily be required. And so I just want to share that. So that's the question: is what's been like in terms of public feedback so far, and are we doing anything different from what Oakland or Berkeley are doing in terms of sort of the implementation of the design to make it sort of calm and low stress?
Navarro or Jeff, would you like to take the questions?
Sure, I'll start off and then Jeff can add to that. Thank you for your comments. And so, you know, we have, like, as you said, you know, we haven't compiled comments yet, right? So it's really hard at this point to give it would be premature to say what the direction it's taking specifically. And to be honest, I have not seen all the comments yet. And it makes a big difference also seeing them in aggregate than one at a time as they come in, right? So I don't feel that I'm prepared to speak for that. Maybe Jeff has more of a feeling in that. In general, I would say I'm just very happy with the feedback that we've received, this wasn't really what you were asking, but I think it does speak to some of your concerns that we've gotten a nice variety of feedback in terms of very specific comments and comments even about like design or presentation versus more qualitative, more questions that could lead to changes in the plan. I fully expected when we went with the draft, we could keep going with revisions forever and think that we're getting to a very final stage. You just have to put something out with all this feedback that we've gotten, like over 1,300 people, right, have participated. It's a lot. So part of this whole process is, have we missed something, right? So that's partly what we're looking for here. Jeff, did you want to add to that or modify anything that I said?
Thanks, Navarro, and thanks for the question, council member, and I appreciate you being there at that community workshop. We've received over 100 comments, and that could be individual comments, maybe from the same person, but over 100 comments to date. So we're really excited to. Don't mean to make that aside. We've got lots of robust comments so far. We're going to be reviewing that in detail with city staff, and so I can't tell you which way we're moving on that, but certainly in terms of your second question about implementation of the bike boulevard network, there's lots of different ways that the cities go about doing that. Oakland, just recently in the last couple of months, put together an implementation guide for their bike boulevards, which we called out in their bicycle plan, and they call them neighborhood bike routes. They have identified a couple of different questions they're answering and some guidance there. They don't have strict metrics that they adhere to in order to do that. They've already identified where they want to do this, and then it's kind of on a case-by-case basis of putting in traffic calming. There is this desire, obviously, to do that, and that's, I think, the definition and the distinction between a bike route, which is just any old street that says you're just on your own mixing with traffic, versus a bike boulevard. A bike boulevard says there needs to be something that prioritizes the bicyclist, where vehicles are allowed, but bicycles take priority. And so that's something that I think could be revisited, I think, with staff. It's certainly something that we did call out as a requirement and definition in the current draft. But it's true, right now there is not that inclusion of new metrics. It's something that we could take a look at. But as I mentioned before, this plan does have evaluation metrics called out in recommendations, that every new roadway project includes bicycle pedestrian counts before and after, which is something that wasn't in the last plan. And I think that's going to help the city council and staff understand how your investments, whether it's a bike boulevard, a separated bikeway, a new intersection, what's that doing to increase the number of people walking and bicycling, which we know has stayed kind of flat over the last 10 years. And that's true of most cities in the Bay Area, Emeryville included. So what do we need to do to change the dial to get more people out walking and bicycling? What we heard is that people want separation. And so that's what we responded to largely in this plan.
Thank you.
Other members who have questions or comments? Is this a study session? Member Mora?
So I know this is kind of early in the process, and I just wanted to know what we can expect. So when you receive, and I'm looking at the summary of comments from like the Bike Pedestrian Committee, the Planning Commission, and I know you have a lot of other comments. Are these comments going to be arranged and then responded to? Like, you guys think it's a good idea to incorporate it, or you don't? You know, would that distinction be made clear, or will the bike ped plan just be, or sorry, will the active transportation plan just be revved up, having received the comments? Will we have some traceability in that process?
That's not something that we've explicitly discussed yet, but maybe Jeff, if you could discuss how you've been handling that with other projects that you've been working on with other jurisdictions, maybe that would be helpful information. Would that help, Councilmember Mora?
Yeah, that would be helpful. Like, I'm just thinking, like, I see the Bike Pedestrian Committee, they suggested a 3 to 7 second lag to allow pedestrians, right? So it'd be helpful that, you know, you guys, you being the experts and having access to experts, you know, weigh in on whether that's a good or a bad idea, or maybe it's good in certain locations and not others. But, you know, put that rationale in there, because I'd like to see that expertise brought to bear in addressing those comments.
Okay, but something we did do for BPAC, as you may recall, is that we made a comprehensive list of all of the recommendations BPAC had made, and then said how and where, or if they weren't addressed in the ATP, why. So that is something, you're hoping for something similar to that. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
Of course, though, I'd be happy to know, I'd like to know if the rest of the council agrees that that's a good idea and a good use of staff time.
It's a fair question. Is there, between Navarre and Jeff, is there a change in the amount of time it will take to produce the final ATP if you're responding to the quantity of comments you mentioned in the way that's been proposed? Or is there some form of a hybrid, like summary fashion, in which you can provide the feedback that's been requested without doing a CEQA style line by line to comment kind of thing?
Jeff, did you want to respond to that? I'm thinking that addressing themes might be a more efficient way of addressing things and really get to the heart of your concerns. Would that be accurate?
That is consistent with what we've done in the past with your neighboring jurisdictions and other areas, is that we do not treat it like a CEQA document where each individual comment is responded to, but rather we could lump major comments or recurring comments, especially ones that we hear a lot from. Obviously, it comes like through your committees or through it's a recurring comment. So it's pretty important that we take note of it. We could respond to those as themes, and I think that's something that we could definitely accomplish within our current scope and fee, and have that provided as part of a staff report when we come back to council.
And just so that there's, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that sounds reasonable to use your discretion, right, to group certain things into themes and maybe address that theme. But maybe you might have one salient comment that, you know, requires more response or thought. And I think it's fine to use your discretion in addressing those.
What I'd like to propose is that we do what Jeff recommended, and that if it's possible and you have collected all the comments, so that any council member who wants to see what all the comments were, since you won't be providing a line by line item, perhaps those can be, I know we have a webpage that's collecting the feedback from folks. Perhaps we can simply have a link to all the comments that were provided, so that members in advance of the next meeting have the chance to peruse all comments. So no comment is buried or left, you know, unavailable. Is that something that's feasible?
Yes.
Okay, I think if there's a space where all the comments are there and we can then see what the themes are as you've proposed, that's a reasonable compromise. Other members who wish to provide comments or feedback on this item? I just want to thank everybody who's been working on this, Jeff and his team, in particular in Navarre. We've been working on this for quite a while. We've seen this, I think, 2 or 3 times at Transportation Committee. So I've had ample opportunity to provide comments over the last 6 to 12 months, and just really appreciate the direction this is headed and the good work. And we continue to receive very good input and feedback from the public and the committees. And so hopefully we will have a final product to present for consideration when we come back in May. And that can be included in our in our body of plans that we're going to have as we're doing the capital improvement plan as well for the year. So if I don't see any additional final questions or comments, Member Moore, do you have your hand up again?
Sorry, it was left up.
Okay. Seeing no more comments, thank you so much. That will bring this study session item to a close, but members of the public who are watching who have not had a chance to comment can still do so through January 20th. And that will be when they collect all the final comments that we've been collecting for the last few months and provide updates to the draft and responses where appropriate. We'll move now, members, to item 6.2, which is our second study session, which is a study session for 5850 Shell Mountain Life Sciences Tower, located at 5850 Shell Mountain Way in Emeryville. And I'll turn it over to Miru Desai, Senior Planner.
Yes, good evening, Mayor Baldus and council members. If April, could you please bring up the PowerPoint? I am Miru Desai. I'm the project planner for this proposal. And so this is a study session for redevelopment of a site located at 5850 Shell Mount. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah. There you go. So this is a site that has an existing building which is vacant. It's about 61,000 square feet, which will be demolished. It sits on a 1.5 acre parcel located at the intersection of Shellmound Way and Christie Avenue. Next slide, please. So the council and the commission has been seeing this proposal for the last year and a half. There have been 4 planning commission sessions, and this is the second city council session. And the reason for this has been the key issue to be discussed here is the mix of uses. Next slide, please. The parcel size, as the parcel size is between 1 and 5 acres, our regulations require a mix of uses where one use must be residential. Our regulations do not specify the proportion of the mix between residential and non-residential uses, and it is up to the discretion of the commission or the council to determine whether the proposal qualifies as mixed use. Next slide, please. So when the applicant first came in, they were only proposing a life science tower. And when questioned about why no residential, they discussed the financial infeasibility of residential uses at this site. Further discussions revealed on the third study session, they included the tower with 6 townhouse units. This proposal was also shown to the council in their first study session. The fourth study session, it has now upped the residential units to 30. And this is the proposal that is going to be reviewed by the council at your study session today. Next slide, please. So it's a 14-story, 240-foot high life science or research and development building, which accommodates a little over 350,000 square feet of space and 30 affordable residential rental units. The division, the unit mix is, you can see on the table, and the affordable levels will be 20 units at very low income and 10 units at low income. Next slide, please. This is sort of the ground floor site plan. The lobby is at the intersection of Shellmound Way and Christie Avenue, and this is the lobby of the life science building. And the vehicular entry is off Christie Avenue. The residential units are located along the northern property line. Next slide, please. This shows kind of the typical floor plan. The one on the left is from levels 2 to 5, and the one on the right is 6 and above. Next slide, please. And this section kind of shows you how the building is structured, where the parking goes. As you can see, there are 5 levels of parking, and you have residential along the northern edge. Next slide, please. And this is the preliminary building massing, and the applicant is probably going to show a few more pictures regarding the massing. Next slide, please. So in terms of the key development standards that the project has to fulfill regarding FAR, height, and density. So this project will require 100 bonus points for FAR and 100 bonus points for height. They do not need any bonus points for residential density. Next slide, please. So just as a reminder, bonus points for non-residential projects, the applicant needs to obtain half the bonus points by paying an additional affordable housing impact fee, which calculates to approximately $3.5 million if a building permit were to be issued for this project today. The remaining 50 bonus points are to be earned through provision of community benefits. At this time, the applicant has identified additional public open space and also identified providing additional family-friendly units for obtaining the 50 community benefit points. Next slide, please. In terms of parking, the project proposal complies with city's parking regulations. Just to note, this is also under the transit hub overlay zone, which reduces all required parking by half. And the project does comply with our regulations. In terms of bicycle parking, what is going to be required is 71 short-term and 99 long-term. And at this stage, they are showing some spaces where bike parking is provided, but these details will be sorted out as the project moves forward. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned, the last time the Planning Commission saw this project, this specific project with Life Science Tower and 30 affordable units, was in October. The Commission felt that a good faith effort had been made to increase the amount of housing in the project from 6 to 30 units, and felt that the massing consideration of the project had moved in the right direction. There were some other comments regarding transportation assessment, bicycle parking, as well as design of open spaces. One commissioner did mention an interest in exploring increasing the number of residential units by adding ADUs, as ADUs do not count towards FAR. So during the Planning Commission discussion in October, when there was comments regarding why 30 units, why not more, the discussion related to the fact that if they were to add more housing units, then they would not be able to meet the FAR. However, so the point here is that ADUs do not count towards FAR, and therefore ADUs could be proposed in this project. Just in terms of what the council saw back in May when they had shown a Life Science Tower and 6 units, the council was pretty unanimous in saying that the 6 units was not enough, and therefore the mix of uses was not appropriate. Next slide, please. So regarding the ADUs and the FAR conversation, staff, after the Planning Commission, had further internal discussions about the potential for maximizing residential component of the project. And during these discussions, it was noted that the applicant could choose to take advantage of the state superdensity bonus law, the AB 1763, which precludes any kind of imposition of residential density requirements for projects which are 100% affordable projects. So, this approach could be contemplated, but it would require a complete redesign, including issues of massing, construction type, and parking. Staff has not received any feedback from the applicant about this concept since it was proposed a little recently, and they may be able to respond at this time. So in terms of the questions for the council is really the mix. Is the project, the project is primarily a R&D building with 30 BMR units. And does the council feel whether this mix of uses is appropriate for this site or not? And should other options, such as the state superdensity bonus law, be considered to increase the number of residential units? And of course, any other design or other issues that the council might have would be received. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know that I believe the applicant has a presentation as well.
We'll go to the applicant's presentation, please.
I'm sorry, I did not receive a presentation from the applicant.
They are here to present, so if you can elevate the four names that I had provided you, April.
They're here. Is it an oral presentation?
Michael, can you pull up the presentation?
Yeah, good evening. Apologies if there's been a glitch here. Am I able to share my screen?
Let me.
This is Michael Kale from SCB. Yeah, there we go. Okay, let's see. Can I do this?
Mike, I have to move you back over and over to an attendee, and then I'm gonna promote you as a panelist so that you can share your screen.
Fantastic. Thank you. Sorry for the delay, everyone. Okay, so when I try and share screen, it says host has disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay, hold on just a second.
Michael, why don't we just go ahead and get started while we pull up the presentation as well, if that's all right with the council.
Yes, please.
Yep, no problem. So thank you, everyone. Good evening, council, and thank you all for your time tonight. My name is Alessio Tropiano with CA Ventures, joined by my colleagues Mike Lee and Pete Hoffman from CA and Michael Kell from SCB. Our apologies. Mike Lee, who's been running point on this project for CA, is a bit under the weather and will be mostly listening in the background tonight. So we understand that council has reviewed our presentation already. And to keep with our limited amount of time that we have tonight, we would just like to review kind of the executive summary with you all, and then turn it over to the Q&A portion and address any specific questions that you may have on the project. So following the May Planning Commission and June City Council sessions, the project team went away and took into consideration comments made by both groups. The updated project was presented to the Planning Commission back in October of last year with 3 revised primary goals. The first was to increase the overall number of residential units within the project, which we've been able to do, and increased from an initially proposed 6 units to 30 affordable units. Second, we were asked to reorient the tower to better blend the Christie corridor, which we feel we've accomplished, and the massing can be seen in our presentation, which we will pull up shortly. And I believe Maru brought up a few of the massing photos as well. But Michael Kell from SCB can certainly run through the reorientation with the council and address any questions you may have. And third was to maintain a mix of uses on the site that meets the goals of the city and is economically deliverable by CA Ventures. Again, we feel we've done this with our revised project. So what we're asking at this study session is if the proposed mix of uses is acceptable to the city council and is something they would support, should it be brought up in a formal proposal. So that's really our executive summary. And I think at this point, we'd like to turn it over to the Q&A portion and any specific questions you all may have.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. At this time, I'll call for public comment. Members of the public who wish to comment on the study session item for 5850 Shellmound Way will have 3 minutes to comment. April, did we receive any written comment cards for this project study session in advance of tonight's meeting?
No, Mayor, we did not.
Okay, this is the last call for public comment. I will recognize Brian Donahue for 3 minutes, please.
Okay, notice what's not being talked about is what is almost never talked about at the council meetings, and that is this project, I'm sure, will be an all rental residential project, no home ownership possibilities. Now, of course, everyone here knows that the general plan provides that we're supposed to be increasing the ratio of home ownership over rental homes. And we've been going the opposite direction for like at least 5 years. And that, by the way, is what the organization known as YIMBY, Yes in My Backyard, that's what they want. They want only only rental housing, because that's how developers can maximize their profits. They don't make as much money when they produce condos. So since the council is regulatorily captured by YIMBY, and you guys are working for the developer, by default, you're working for the developers, not for the people, because the people want home ownership, and you guys are not delivering it. The fact that you're not talking tonight about anything at all about the rental condition or home ownership condition for this proposed project tells me this is just going to be more of the same. You guys are working for the developer. It's embarrassing that if the public were to know that it's going to be another 100% rental project, and so you don't want the embarrassment, it seems, and so that's why you're not talking about it, but it should be talked about. And it's sort of like the last issue where, with the bike boulevard system as it is now, with the measurability, the citizens can easily check to see how their government is doing. How are they doing keeping bicycles safe on the bike boulevards? Oh, look, they're not doing a good job. We can see because there's too many vehicle trips per day, or it's over the allotted amount. And we can see that very clearly by the traffic counts that the city is required to conduct. So you're going to be replacing that with a new plan that has no measurability. And so we're going to have to just take your word for it that you're doing a great job with bicycle safety. Just take our word for it. You don't need to know. Just take our word for it. We're doing great. And that's sort of what this council's turned into. Now, all about that, and coming back to the all rental thing, you don't want us to know that this is going to be another all rental project, and you're working for the developer in this case, as you have in the recent past 3 years. And it's tying back to this connection that the council majority has with the YIMBY organization. And it's a lobbying group for developers. It's a right-wing backed group backed by the Koch brothers. And you guys are, regulatorily captured. You're acting as if you're developers. They're your friends or something. Either that or is it kickbacks? I have not ever seen any evidence of kickbacks. I would doubt that. I think it's just you have become captured.
Thank you for your comment. Are there any other members of the public who wish to comment on item 6.2 from the study session? Seeing none, public comment is now closed, and we'll turn to members who wish to ask questions or discuss this study session item. Is there any member who wishes to ask questions or provide feedback? Member Pryforce.
Hi. So there definitely is a concern about the rental versus ownership. And from what I was able to see, it went from the townhouses proposal to 30 units. Is the rental versus ownership conversation, is that too soon, or is it just about construction now and then eventually that be something that's visited later? So that's the question I have. Is that something that's being determined now? And, in terms of as this is being built and planned. And so that'll be the question. So I think that's it.
Okay, would someone from the development team like to answer the question?
I can take that, Mayor Valdez.
Okay.
So at this time, I did mention that these were they are being proposed as rental units. Staff report also mentions that. In terms of whether the city can require rental or ownership, this has been discussed many, many times, and the short answer is no. City cannot require a developer to make it ownership. Instead, what we have done in order to get to that is that whenever a project requires bonus points and it includes residential housing, we ask that the developer put a map on it so that in the future, if the developer wishes to make these rental units into condo, then it is very easy for them to do so. But, and the city attorney will, can adjust this, but I believe that we legally, the city cannot require any developer to make residential units ownership or rental. It is a choice that they have.
Mr. Kennedy, would you like to expand on that further?
Certainly. I'd like to ask that Christy Kroll be promoted, but she has confirmed that what Miru said was correct. If you have further questions along this line, we could certainly ask Ms. Kroll to respond.
Okay, good evening, Christy. I see you've joined the panel. Would you like to address the council member's question?
Sure, Miru is correct. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's no law or any regulation that would allow the city to require a development applicant to present their units as ownership units rather than rental units, just as there would be, no requirement or legal regulation that we could impose to, require any certain kind of project on a certain site. All we can do is give them feedback. So council's welcome to do that, but we cannot legally ask them to, have either ownership or rental units.
And just to clarify for the council member's benefit, is that because we simply haven't taken the steps to do something, or is it because the state and federal law precludes us from doing that?
You'd likely be precluded. There could be takings issues. I'd have to look into that for you, but whether the city could adopt some kind of regulation requiring a certain type of unit, I'd have to look into that. But currently, we don't have one.
Okay. And just for the benefit of the two new council members, as Miru mentioned, just to be clear, when she says mapping, when apartment buildings are built, the developer has a lower threshold of simply producing a residential space where there's each of the units is considered a common building unit, as opposed to condominiums, where, as you all probably understand, the condo owners are owners of individual separate units and they have a joint ownership of a common space that they share. What we require is, if you have an apartment building and it's built without condo mapping, what ends up happening is that if the building wishes to convert into ownership, which we have examples of that have happened here in the city. Watergate is one such example that was all rental property that's now all ownership. It has to go through a mapping process, which is extensive and costly. And so if you do it after the fact? So we require that to be part of the design process up front with any proposal that's residential. So it's already mapped at the time that the building is constructed, which means that it facilitates the ease of turning it into an ownership property as quickly as possible. That's desired. Member Piper.
So from my understanding, and I think this is really important in terms of like future conversations that I have with residents. This is something that has popped up. So from my understanding, that the due diligence that is made in terms of the mapping is so that these units, similar to the Watergate scenario, that these units can be made into ownership units or condominiums. And so there's nothing that would prevent that from happening, that whatever is the process that we're engaging right now, that it can eventually become an ownership process. It kind of reminds me of conversations I've had with Councilmember Mora in terms of EV installations and whether or not the developments are being constructed with that in mind, and how difficult it is to go backwards and ask develop housing units to then now implement EV stations. And so what we're saying is that it can eventually become ownership and eventually become condominiums, but and we're doing the due diligence, we're making the mapping, even though it is costly. for that to happen. Is that what's happening?
Yes, that's an I don't know if you can hear me. That's an excellent analogy, and Councilmember Mora's analogy is a very good one. So with parking spaces, we call that EV ready or conduit access or ready. So a parking garage, they're often built with the conduit spaces in them for EV wiring and whatnot to be put in. And oftentimes what happens is the parking garage owner will put EV stalls at a certain number of the stations, but not the whole parking structure, because they don't think the demand matches what's there yet. But it's already in there, and the conduit and electric is already in there, so that as demand changes, it's immediately able to be converted over into EV spaces if they want as demand changes. Similarly, when we passed the ordinance to require condo mapping here, it was with that same concept in mind, is that what we found in this area, the market here for real estate is such that because of the proximity of the university and a number of other things, there's a greater demand for rental housing here than you might find in a Pleasanton or a Livermore. And so a lot of the developers here, because we can't force them to choose ownership or rental, they begin with a rental property. But as was noted with Watergate and several other examples, the Bessler building, which I lived in as a tenant, converted over into a condominium building at one point. The condo mapping, if we require it up front when the building is approved, then the city and the residents who wish to convert their apartment building into a condo building never have to go back and go through that costly and very legal heavy process, because it's been required by us up front. So every project that we've approved that's residential, that's multifamily in any way in the last, I believe, 6 years, has required that, because that's an ordinance in the city. So yes, you're correct. You can tell residents that we can't make it ownership now, but it is ownership ready. And what we find is that a lot of developers keep it rental for a period of about 10 years because of construction liability laws that make them liable, and they don't want to turn it over and get sued by a bunch of homeowners. They would rather deal with the tenants, which I'm sure you and I can both appreciate is how tenants can often be subjected to bad property management companies. But that is just the way the law unfortunately works. So we've put that additional layer of protection with the mapping in there so that a resident group that wished to turn over into ownership could do that at any point, because the mapping exists. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, so two things. So one is for anyone watching this meeting, it's very important to identify that these units and any other future projects, and as the mayor has said in past projects, that they are ownership ready, and that is a due diligence that the city is having. And so any comments or messages to me, that would be my response. And if you find any of that that needs to be challenged, then let me know. But so far, everything sounds it sounds kosher. So I just want to communicate that. The other piece is that just because, and we saw it with redlining, historically redlining that pushed African Americans away from home ownership in the past, that just because something is legal doesn't mean that there aren't these nods that happen. And so, for example, we can say that the state, we can't require homes to be owned for homes to be constructed, or residential units to be constructed that are homeowner based. But we can create, we can, in our conversations, our dialogues, and even in terms of our or how we make suggestions, right? Because that's how, redlining happened under the law, right? There was nothing illegal about redlining, even though we saw the impact that it had on our communities. That there are still these suggestions, and so whether or not we are making the suggestion that Emeryville is welcome to home ownership, that's something that from what I'm hearing, that it doesn't, that whether or not we're making a suggestion, that it's still the climate economically, it is much harder. There are these barriers that exist that prevent that make it harder, not prevent, that make it harder for anyone coming into Emeryville to create any residential unit, whether it's mixed use or not, for them to outright say that this is going to be a unit that you can own. However, connecting to the previous statement, the previous point that I made, that the due diligence that's being made is so that that is something that can be explored in the future, and there would be nothing that would prevent home ownership in the future. But once again, like these are a bunch of forces that Emeryville has no control over. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Yeah, and I would like to ask if the city clerk, the city attorney, Mrs. Crowell, given that she was the responding party from the city attorney's office, if you could please, just for the benefit of all council members, but to member Pryforce's question, if you could share when the condo mapping ordinance was passed, because there will be some buildings obviously built prior to that law that don't have the developer at the time didn't have the obligation to map it. That was a relatively recent thing that the most recent council put in place, but I think it's like 6 to 8 years old now. So if we could just check on when that was passed, because if the council members do receive questions about being able to have homes that they currently rent or buildings they live in as renters become ownership opportunities similar to Bessler or Watergate or several others that have happened here, it would be helpful to let them know which ones will automatically have the mapping on it and which ones it would be, it would either not be automatically there or it would have been done by somebody other than the developer potentially, because there will be a time difference between when we passed that ordinance and the prior times. And then just to add on to your last point, council member, I absolutely agree with you that there's a need for more ownership housing. It's something that is really lacking because it's an obvious opportunity for upward socioeconomic mobility, and that disproportionately harms brown and black families who do not have wealth inheritance in the same structures that white families have benefited from historically, and it creates real divisions in the opportunity for people to move upward, to go to college, to work a single job, to transfer wealth to their children and grandchildren. It's a very intergenerational problem, and it's, as you noted, institutional in nature, and it has preyed upon low-income communities of color for a very long time, since the time people were brought here against their will in the founding of this country. And I think one of the things that this city has tried to do, and I don't think that any city is perfect, but I want to recognize something that we did that was different from many other cities in the state. In fact, I think city staff could probably confirm for me there's only a couple others that did what we did, was that during the era of redevelopment, when there were large redevelopment agencies, and we have a successor agency, and as you've noted and seen probably, we've used the remaining properties we owned with redevelopment to create 100% below market rate affordable housing made available to very and extremely low income households. Prior to redevelopment going away, the city's way of promoting housing opportunities, because redevelopment law required a 20% set aside of all funds cities took that were used to tear down old industrial and commercial buildings and redevelop their city. But that was obviously disproportionately economically inequitable. And one of the things that happened with the 20% set aside here in Emeryville was the city of Emeryville used it to actually purchase its own homes. And it was a huge economic opportunity for the city. And so we have 249 homes that are ownership units, whether those are single family homes, duplexes, or condos in buildings around the city that are made available to low income families. And we have covenants in the deeds that protect them for low income homeowners. We also have a matching first time home buyer, low interest, low income homeowner loan program. So you can actually have both, where you get a loan for a low income family that wants to buy and stay. And there's a dedicated market of homes in this city. And there was almost no other cities in California that did their redevelopment funding for homes the way we did, but we used it 100% for home ownership. The governor killed redevelopment in 2012, and in doing that, killed the economic engine that funded redevelopment agencies. And so cities no longer have the money to do those things. And we were stuck with a set of empty parcels or burned out buildings that we have an obligation to dispose of. And a lot of cities are literally auctioning them off to the highest bidder and the biggest developer. And in Emeryville, I'm very proud that we took every housing asset that remained and every redevelopment property that we have that was eligible for affordable housing, and we put out RFPs and we've converted them all into 100% low-income housing. So I completely agree with you. Home ownership is an absolute necessity and something that we don't have enough of in the city. And you and I suppose, and others here on council, if we had the ability to go write a few federal laws and state laws that changed the way takings clause worked in the Constitution. We have some Supreme Court decisions, as the assistant city manager mentioned, or sorry, assistant city attorney. The takings clause, essentially, if a developer was to show that we deprived them of an economic interest by imposing a law on them that changed their economic forecast, that's a takings clause under the Constitution, and we would be obligated to compensate them rather handsomely, unfortunately. So there are very strong limits, but as we've tried to do, we put condo mapping and other things in place in order to give the community the best opportunity for the future, because the economies and the rental markets do change, and home ownership in the past has come about from those types of changes, so we can hope for it in the future. And before I recognize the Vice Mayor, I see that Ms. Crowell raised her hand. I'd love to invite her to correct me or add on if I've made a mistake.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to answer your question as to where in our regulations and the ordinance effective date, section 9-5.2007 of our planning regulations require multi-unit residential projects to, like this one, to obtain a condo map. And that ordinance was ordinance 15-009, and it was effective in December of 2015, adopted in December of 2015, rather. So it's only been in effect since 2015.
7 years. So any building that got its approvals in the last 7 years, so it would be an approval date from the city planning commission or city council. All of those will have, and that's a lot of buildings, all of those will have condo maps on them because we require it. So thank you for the question and comments. And Vice Mayor Welch.
I'm sorry, my internet was going out a little bit earlier. The ADU conversation, was a location discussed where those would go? My apologies if I missed it.
Miru, could you answer that question?
So it would go along where the existing proposed units are. So they would just add to the units, and it would be defined as an ADU. It would look no different. So ADU is, the way we think of ADU is, you have a single family house, and then you have a detached or an attached ADU, which is much smaller. Whereas in a multifamily, the way it works out, the ADU's laws have changed, so they allow larger units. So they would, in fact, be one of the, if they did the ADU, that would add about 7 or 8 units. So they would be, instead of 30, it would be 37, 38. And they would look they would be in the same area where they're located now. Does that answer the question?
So you're treating it mirrored, is that correct?
I'm sorry?
Sorry, I broke up, I think. Those are what we commonly refer to as granny flats, is kind of what you're saying, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Miru.
Are there other comments or questions before I go to the 2 questions staff proposed for us to give direction on? Okay, we have 2 questions, members, that were presented on the slideshow. The first is, does the council generally approve of the mix of uses, which is to have research and development accompanying 30 affordable units, so residential of 30 affordable units alongside an R&D. And so I'll if somebody wants to go first, we're just looking for a yes or no on the uses and a comment if you have one, but the developer is seeking input tonight to see if there's a council support for that. Councilmember Mora?
So I just think in answering this question, it's important to recognize the journey that this development has been on, and how it's gone from originally there was just a life science tower, and then there was a large back and forth with the discussing the financial feasibility of incorporating housing for better mix of use. They came back with 6 units. That was further challenged by the Planning Commission, and that was then brought to 30 units and brought back to the Planning Commission. I was part of that process, and I think it's important to recognize it's not easy to incorporate housing on this development. I would still encourage the developer to take those recent comments from the Planning Commission and continue to challenge and see if they can incorporate more housing to constitute a better mix of use. But taking all things into consideration and the path that got us here, I do think that this 30 units definitely far better constitutes a mix of use than the previous 6 units.
Okay, thank you for that. Either of my other two colleagues wish to comment next on your answer to the question? Vice Mayor Welch.
I agree with Councilmember Mora's sentiments. I would like to see now better understanding of how the ADUs would be incorporated. I think it's a good mix of use. I was publicly very critical of the original offering of 6. Especially given the original conversations, I was really disappointed with that. I would like to see if the ADUs could be incorporated, but I know the challenges of the site. They've been well discussed. I think I feel okay with this, and I would like to see if the ADUs could be incorporated.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Pryforce, your comments and answer?
So when the townhouses were originally proposed, they would have been rental townhouses?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So to go from townhouses that were rentals to 30 rental units is a significant achievement. So my kudos to all of the council members that were involved in making that happen.
Do you agree with the mix of uses then? Is that your answer to the question?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. And I will also agree, and I will thank Vice Mayor Welch and Councilmember Donahue in particular for both asking and demanding for 30 or more units at the meeting last time we had, and all council members supported that request. And I want to thank the developer, who I know at the time said that they didn't think that was feasible, for finding a way to make that feasible. I'm hearing tonight there's an interest in asking the developer to explore the planning commission comments about ADUs to see if a few additional units is just with a show of raising your physical hand. Does everyone agree that that's a request that we'd like to ask them to examine? Yes, to see if there's an additional. Okay, I see a unanimous raising of hands.
One clarification on that, John. So, whether it's the ADU or some other mechanism, right? So I don't want to be too limiting in the instruction.
Fair enough. So I think the consensus to clarify is that if there's an opportunity to add several additional units, whether that's through the ADU process or whether that's through AB 1763, there are options that are available. That's the direction the council is giving is support, correct? Hands? Okay, so there's unanimous agreement on that. And then so again, just thank you to everybody for the feedback on that. So the other question that was presented to us was comments on the preliminary design concept. Do you have any, we don't usually weigh in too heavily on this because this body sits as a potential appeal body should the planning commission's decision be appealed. So we provide high level comments on a few items if we have any, and we don't do the same deep dive that the planning commission does. But does anybody have, I have a couple, but I just want to see if anyone else first has a couple comments on the design.
I just have, I'm sorry, Councilman, sorry.
No, it's okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think I just had questions around the EV. Whether or not whether or not the residences, these units, that they are just planning for the future. And especially given the governor and the state of California's plans around electric vehicles and so those would be questions.
Great. Would somebody from the design or development team like to answer the council member's question? Have you explored having these the rental units being all EV ready and conduit ready?
So currently, this is Alessio Tropiano with CA Ventures. So all parking will have EV accessibility, whether that's built in day one or prepared for the future. That's something that we have to figure out. I think it just depends on the level of demand, but there will certainly be those conduits that Mayor Bowders had referred to earlier. So it will be acceptable for all EV parking. But currently there is no proposed parking for the residential units. That is certainly something that we can explore more, and whether that is something that we incorporate into the design, or whether that's something that is used from the current parking that's already there. That's something that we can dive into more and explore on a further basis. But I do know that it is the hope and idea of the city and this council to reduce parking, which I think we have tried to do. We are definitely under the allowable number of units and are certainly making each one of those units in the parking structure EV ready, whether that's now or in the future.
Okay, thank you for your answer. Others who have design comments or feedback? I have two items. My first is that the design that you've presented that was included in the staff report identifies a room for bike parking, but it doesn't provide any details to the bicycle parking. Bicycle parking in the city has been a priority, especially when you're not going to be providing parking stalls to folks, which we have prioritized given the very dense, rich transit opportunities in this neighborhood and the city's goal of limiting auto-centric uses. The bike parking becomes even more important to the design of this structure, and my future support for the parking structure will be dependent on not following our current planning regulations, actually. Our current planning regulations on bike parking are out of date. They need to be modernized to reflect the needs of people who use other types of bicycles, which include cargo bikes, e-bikes, bikes with trailers, and people who have limited or disability accessible needs through cycling. Current standards we have require lifting bikes into bike racks out the walls, hanging them from bike spokes, and other types of bike racks that are for traditional bikes, which can be included and incorporated into your design. But I would like to see that you work closely with the city staff to identify ways to ensure that we don't have senior citizens who choose to use an e-bike trying to lift an e-bike onto the wall, that we do not have people who have disabilities or other limited mobilities and use bikes that have three wheels perhaps, not having ample spaces to park them in, and that families that are going to occupy these units that are lower income have the opportunity to have cargo bikes or trailers instead of cars, which are economically and socially beneficial to them and their families. That's my first comment. My second comment is that I'm not sold on the bonus points for the proposed open space. The proposed open space is essentially a very loud corner of Shellmound Way and Christie Avenue, and while I appreciate the number of trees I saw in the design of this corner, I'm a little concerned that that is being passed off as open space, which is not fungible and usable by people. Open space needs to be made more usable. And so if the proposal here is to meet the affordable housing payment and then get the other points between the affordable housing units and open space, I would like to propose you take seriously the advice you received from the rest of the council and the planning commission about exploring a handful of additional units, because I would rather give you a few more points for more units than I would for that proposed open space, which is essentially a large corner on a busy intersection, which is not accessible to families with children. So those are my comments on design. Anybody else wish to provide additional comments on design? Let me actually ask, that's my comments. Does anybody agree with my bike parking comments? I guess first, so that they have direction. If there's not, if I'm the only one who believes that, then that's not direction. So do others here agree with me on the bike parking design guideline recommendations? Okay, I have 3 hands, so that's a majority. And do others here agree with me on asking them to consider other ways to get their bonus points other than the proposed open space at the corner? That's 3 hands. Okay, so that's a majority. That's a majority for giving feedback on those 2 items. Member Pryforce.
Also, could you go back to the voting? So the first part, your recommendations about the about their bike plan and bike parking. So I agree with you on that.
Okay.
The second part, I didn't really understand. I think I'd have to look at what their plan is a little bit more. And I see what you're saying in terms of like the trees and that sort of thing, but I probably have to like compare it to other structures because we're a small city, and so I'm very familiar of where they are located, and I probably will try to do a deep dive into like how they're trying to design this space, considering that it's so close to the freeway. If the gas station is still there in 10 years, so you got that gas station there. Other than that very busy intersection, it tends to be relatively dark in many of those areas, and I don't want like a family coming up to me, 5-10 years later and saying, hey, Kalima, okay, one, there's no way for me to park, and I have a family, no way for me to park. I've got to go to the public market in order to charge my car. And so, there are a couple of things that I definitely have concerns over in terms of the design that would be a bit more future-proof. And so, and at the same time, also align with many of the design interests of my council member colleagues and staff recommendations.
Sure, I recommend that you, if you have time, go ahead and sit down with staff. The bonus point system, the way I'm referring to it here, is they're proposing points. So they're proposing to provide open space beyond what's required. And I've often found that sometimes developers do that and it's not a genuine open space that's really usable. So we don't have to accept bonus points for that. We can ask them to get it from any of the other things on the list in the bonus point system. And that's what I'm suggesting, is that I think a sidewalk with some trees on it is not the best way of getting points. And if they want to still build that sidewalk, which they have to build some of it anyway, that's fine. But I think that we should encourage them to get points doing things that are going to materially benefit families. And to me, a larger sidewalk plaza on a busy corner is not the most effective way to do that. And that's all I'm trying to propose today. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Are there any other members who have comments or questions on this before we move on? And does the design team or staff have any follow-up questions that you wish to have guidance on at the end of this study session?
No, nothing from our end at the moment. Just want to thank you all for your time, the council and Mayor Bowders, and as well as the city staff. You guys have been super helpful throughout this entire process, and we look forward to taking all your comments into consideration and developing those parts of the project that you have comments on and have given us direction on. But I think for now, we have direction on everything that we were hoping to get direction from. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for coming this evening, and thank you to the city staff who've been working on this, as well as the Planning Commission. Madam Clerk, the time is 7:23, and I am adjourning the study session meeting. Okay, we will now go through our little pony show with the very quick meetings. So, Madam Clerk, the time is 7:23. I call to order this special meeting of the Management of Emeryville Services Authority. Please note that I've previously admonished on the record the AB 361 findings for this meeting. Please note that all members are present. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve the final agenda for this meeting.
I move approval of the final agenda.
Okay, I second the motion. There's been a motion by Vice Mayor Welch and a second by Mayor Bowders to approve agenda. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Mora.
Aye.
Councilmember Pryforce.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Welch.
Aye.
And Mayor Bowders.
Aye, thank you. The agenda has been approved. Ex parte communications. Are there any there's nothing on this agenda, so there shouldn't be any. Public comments for items not on the agenda. There'll be 1 minute for public comments not on the agenda in the scope of the Mesa Board. So for 1 minute, please recognize Brian Donahue.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Good evening.
Okay, I heard some very disingenuous talk just now. I mean, very convenient arguments made about home ownership versus rental housing. We can't do anything about it. Our hands are tied. So says the council majority. But that's completely disingenuous. Of course you can. You can do something about it. Of course you can bring rental housing. And yes, I know about the taking clause, of course. But you don't do a direct quid pro quo. It's the same. The way you deal with it is the same way you deal with, let's say, if you have a rogue chief of police, for instance. The five council members cannot directly fire the chief of police because he serves at the pleasure of the city manager. So it's beyond your capability. So what you do is you go behind the scenes. You tell the city manager, your job, however you want to say it, your next job review would probably be much better if we didn't have this horrible chief of police. That is the kind of way that you use to get around the taking clause. Yes, we have the power to deliver on rental.
Thank you for your comment. Thank you for your comment. Okay, any other members of the public who wish to comment on the Mesa Board? Okay, seeing none. April, did we receive any written comment cards?
No, we did not, Mayor.
Okay, members, the only action item tonight is 6.1, which is the resolution for AB 361 to conduct remote meetings. And is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, now is the time for public comment on the action item. I'll recognize people for 1 minute. Please recognize Brian Donahue for 1 minute, please.
Here's how you know when you're being scammed by the city council. Okay, all you guys, virtually all of you, talk about providing home ownership, increasing the rate of ownership over rental housing. Please elect me, and that's what I'll do if I get elected. And then now you're saying it's not possible. So you know. So if you're why are you saying that if it's not possible? That's how you know. That's how we know we are being scammed by you guys. If you can't or won't provide home ownership, then step aside and make room for city council members that will.
Thank you for your comment. Any other members of the public wish to comment on the AB 361 resolution? Okay, seeing none, is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion. Member Pryforce.
So I understand Brian Donahue's frustrations. So the way I understand the way I'm choosing to approach this is that if there are new housing units that are being built, let's say in Oakland, Berkeley, or other cities that are in our region, then that means that they must have figured something out. And so that means being able to sit down. It's just like with John when he made the recommendation that I sit with Mike Lee and others and understand a little bit more about what are their ideas about their, the point system and something alternative to what they just presented. It's about just sitting down and having these conversations. And so for me, it's about sitting down and having conversations with other elected officials, with other city planners and other housing organizations to see if there's a way to figure this out. Because one thing that we established during this council meeting is that some of these things are just beyond our control. They're just beyond what a city can do. But maybe they figured out some things that a city can do, and that means meeting with Paul. Paul comes out of Berkeley, and so maybe Berkeley has figured some things out. I know that there's like this movement in Berkeley around sort of rent to own and some ways that people are thinking about, even though those I think are not really big units, but some ways that tenants have been able to convert some of their rental properties to ownership properties. And so that means sitting down and meeting with this. And so it's not necessarily that we're saying flat out no, to home ownership and we're just giving up. It's that it'll just take some time for us to, if we want to approach it intellectually. Like it's just being able to meet with other folks, figure out some things that they figured out, and see if there's any loopholes that work for these cities, for these housing groups and the housing movement, housing as a human right movement, and see what can work, and then present that information. Hopefully, I don't know what my capacity means. John Kennedy, let me know how much I can actually share or what I can actually do, but to at least have that kind of conversation happening, because Brian Donahue, you're not alone. There are a lot of people who feel this way, and this is going to be revisited several times with these next development projects. Because I know, because my phone and my inbox are blowing up with many of the comments around rent versus home ownership. And I've also been on social media talking about.
Member Pryforce, I'm sorry, you're speaking now to an item not on the agenda for this meeting.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I need you to stick to the agenda because you're creating a Brown Act violation by talking about this. Okay. So is there a motion on item 6.1?
Yeah.
I move approval of the resolution.
Thank you. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Motion by Vice Mayor Welch, second by Member Mora to approve the resolution on 6.1. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Mora?
Aye.
Councilmember Pryforce?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Welch?
Aye.
And Mayor Bowders?
Aye, thank you. The time, Madam Clerk, is 7:31. The Mesa meeting is now adjourned. We'll turn now to the redevelopment successor agency. Time is 7:31, Madam Clerk. I call to order the City of Emeryville as successor agency to the redevelopment agency. Please note that I've given the AB 361 admonition and that all members remain present. This time I'll entertain a motion to approve the final agenda.
I move approval of the final agenda.
I second.
Motion by Vice Mayor Welch, second by Member Mora to approve the agenda. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Mora,
Aye.
Councilmember Pryforce,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Welch,
Aye.
and Mayor Bowders.
Aye, thank you. Ex parte communications. Are there any ex parte communications members wish to present? Okay, seeing and hearing none, now is the time for public comment. A member of the public who wishes to comment on the non-agenda items for the redevelopment agency will have 1 minute to do so. Madam Clerk, please recognize Brian Donahue for 1 minute.
Okay, I agree with Mayor Bowders. Actually, the discussion of the homeownership versus rental topic is would be a Brown Act violation for council members to discuss, especially at length, because it's not an agendized item. So Mayor Bowders is actually correct on that. So I'm not looking for answers. I appreciate Mr. Councilmember Pryforce attempting to, to respond. I do appreciate that. That shows a lot of integrity on his part, but it is actually technically a Brown Act violation. So I'm not really looking for that with my comments. But having said that, I'm going to reiterate. To see that this is we're being scammed is that you look at what the council members are saying, that they're going to provide a greater amount of ownership housing versus renter housing and swap over the ratio in Emeryville. They say that when they're asked to be reelected, but if that's not possible, why are they saying it? And so that shows you we're being scammed. So of course it's possible. I appreciate what Councilmember Pryforce said, looking at other best practices, what other cities have done. Thank you.
Thank you, that's your time. Okay, now is the consent calendar, items 6.1 through 6.5 inclusive. Are there any comments or questions on the consent calendar? Seeing none, is there a motion on the consent calendar?
I move consent.
I second.
Thank you. There's a motion by Vice Mayor Welch, seconded by Member Mora to approve the consent calendar. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Mora,
Aye.
Councilmember Pryforce,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Welch,
Aye.
and Mayor Bowders.
Aye. Thank you. The motion passes. The consent calendar has been approved. There are two action items. Item 7.1 is a resolution of the City Council of Emeryville as the successor agency to the Emeryville Redevelopment Agency, approving and adopting the administrative budget and recognized obligation payment schedule for the period of July 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2024, known as the ROPS. And members, I would like to propose that we waive presentation on this item unless there is a member that wishes to have the full presentation of the ROPS. Okay, seeing none, now is the time for public comment. A member of the public who wishes to comment on the ROPS will have 2 minutes to do so. Okay, please recognize Brian Donahue for 2 minutes.
I would like to hear a ratcheting back of talk among the council members, especially excluding Councilmember Pryforce and Councilwoman Welch, ratcheting back of overheated talk about making Emeryville family friendly. The city council majority, or up till now, has not been interested in that at all. You've made that very clear by your deeds, not your words, but by your deeds. And so it's so cynical. And I'm really getting tired of all the talk about family friendliness and families, especially black and brown families, and it's completely disingenuous. I mean, we're not a family friendly town. We're the worst city for families in the entire East Bay, and we're going nowhere on that. Nowhere in 15 years. So I just hate that talk. It just makes everybody cynical, and it's, do it and then claim how great you guys are. Don't tell us how great you are before doing it. I mean, it's just tiresome and irksome, and that's the best thing I can say about that.
Any other members of the public who wish to comment on the ROPS? In April, did we receive any written comments on the ROPS?
No, Mayor, we did not.
Okay. Public comment is now closed. Is there any discussion or questions regarding the ROPS, which has to go to the County Oversight Board after action here? Okay, seeing none, is there a motion on the ROPS?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, a motion by Member Mora and a second by Vice Mayor Welch to approve the ROPS. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Mora,
Aye.
Councilmember Pryforce,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Welch,
Aye.
and Mayor Bowders.
Aye, thank you. The motion passes and the ROPS is approved. Item 7.2 is a resolution of the City Council approving the AB 361 resolution for the successor agency. Members of the public who wish to comment on the AB 361 resolution will have 1 minute to do so. In April, did we receive any written comment cards for this item?
We did not, Mayor.
Okay, the public comment on this item is now closed. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I move approval of the resolution.
I second.
Thank you. There's a motion by Vice Mayor Welch and a second by Member Mora to approve 7.2. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Mora,
Aye.
Councilmember Pryforce,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Welch,
Aye.
and Mayor Bowders.
Aye, thank you. And the time, Madam Clerk, is 7:37 p.m. and this meeting of the successor agency is now adjourned. Madam Clerk, the time is 7:37. I would like to call to order this meeting of the City Council of the City of Emeryville. Please note this meeting is being conducted pursuant to exemptions provided for to the Brown Act by Assembly Bill 361 during the COVID state of emergency. The Governor's state of emergency authorizes public agencies to conduct their meetings via video or teleconference, provided that the state of emergency exists, and that the agency makes a finding not less than every 30 days that it is in the health, safety, welfare interests of the staff, the public, and our council to continue meeting video and teleconference. Members of the public are encouraged and welcome to participate by joining us on Zoom. You may make comments at the appropriate times using the raise hand feature on Zoom, or by pressing *9 if you're joining us by telephone. If you'd like to submit comments in advance, you can go to the City Council's agenda page. And there's a link there for electronic speaker cards, and you can submit a comment that April will read into the record at the appropriate time. This time, Madam Clerk, I recognize that all members are still present from the prior meetings, and I will now entertain a motion to approve the final agenda.
I move approval of the final agenda.
I second.
Thank you. A motion by Vice Mayor Welch and a second by Councilmember Mora to approve the agenda. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Mora,
Aye.
Councilmember Pryforce,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Welch,
Aye.
and Mayor Bowders.
Aye, thank you. The motion passes and the agenda is approved. Members, we have two special orders of the day today. The first is a goodbye and the second is a hello. So first, on item 4.1, we are going to recognize former council member, Ali Medina. Can we please give her, I know where she is here. Hold on. I have her now joining us by telephone. So Ali, you're now on the main stage by telephone. And if I could, I will read this proclamation. In recognition of the contributions made by Ali Medina during her term on the Emeryville City Council. Whereas Ali Medina was first elected to the Emeryville City Council in November 2016 and served as mayor of Emeryville in 2019. And whereas Ali is a California native, has been a resident of both Emeryville's Triangle neighborhood and the Park Avenue district, California at Davis. Political campaigns advocating for democratic initiatives, candidates, and priorities, and currently works in the technology sector. And whereas Ali has served on many city commissions and committees, including the Transportation and Public Works Committee, the Sustainability Committee, and the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee. And whereas Ali has also represented the city on many regional bodies, including the Gilman Fields JPA, the Alameda Mayor's Conference as the North County representative to the East Bay Economic Development Alliance, the Association of Bay Area Governments, and the California League of Cities. And whereas Ali has been a strong leader on the intersectionality of transit equity and housing affordability, serving as a leading voice on the transformation of San Pablo Avenue into a multimodal corridor, supporting the permitting of 685 new homes during her tenure on the council, with 245 or 36% of those being affordable to low-income households, and pushing for sustainable community design with a focus on the needs of families and persons who live with disabilities. And whereas Ali was a champion for the restoration of Point Emery, a project that included habitat protection, shoreline restoration, the addition of ADA accessible benches and pathways, and the installation of new riprap, a project which will be enjoyed by visitors along the San Francisco Bay Trail for years to come. And whereas during her term as mayor in 2019, Ali coordinated the city's first ever Rotten City Block Party, which brought Emeryville's businesses and residential communities together for an afternoon of fun and festivities, including the city's first ever rottenest dog contest. Now, therefore, be it resolved that on behalf of the Emeryville City Council, the residents of Emeryville, the business community, and the staff of the city of Emeryville, the mayor hereby recognizes Ali Medina for her contributions to the city of Emeryville and wishes her all of the best in her future endeavors. Proclaimed on the 17th day of January, 2023 by the mayor of Emeryville. And I know we can't see you, Ali, but what I would like to do is I would like to first welcome council members to comment. The council members who wish to give farewell remarks to our former colleague. Vice Mayor Welch, I recognize you.
I just wanted to thank former Councilmember Medina for all of her advocacy and work, especially around transportation, just always being a kind colleague, always listening to the public, always being entertaining. I'm gonna miss your attitude. I'm going to miss working alongside you, but I know you will always be in touch, and I'm excited for you to explore this next side of your career. But you will truly be missed, and just thank you for your service to the city.
Thank you. Who would like to go next? Anyone? Member Mora.
I wanted to echo what Council Member Welch said. Just wanting to thank former Council Member Medina on all the passionate work that she's done over the years on transportation, housing, sustainability. These are all the things that when people think of Emeryville, they see a leading city that has still a lot of work to do, but I think a lot of the groundwork that's been laid out before us has been paved by former council member Medina. And also thanks for the mentorship and answering questions during my campaign. I greatly appreciate all of her support. So yeah, just thank you.
Thank you. Others? Member Pryforce?
Thank you for your service.
Thank you. And Ali, I want to take time. You and I were elected and sworn in on the same day, and you both times that I had the privilege of serving as mayor, you served as my vice mayor. And we have worked very, very closely together for the past 6 years, and I probably know few people in the city of Emeryville as well as I know you. And there's a lot of things that you've done that have materially benefited the city that don't get named in this proclamation today. And I'm going to speak to just a couple of them. One is your ability to carry a joke for a very long time. So the Gilman Fields JPA, there's nobody on the current council, maybe Member Welch knows at this point, but an ongoing joke is the Gilman Fields JPA, and the role we have is like having less than 1% of the vote at that JPA. And nobody on the city council really enjoyed going to that meeting because it usually involved us having to say no all the time. And Ali was a champion for that role and took that role on every time. She is always, what I remember most about Ali is that she was always willing to do something even when no one else wanted to do it. And that is particularly important when it comes to the really hard world of campaigns. And I'm speaking to ballot measures. In the last 4 years, there have been 4 ballot measures in the city of Emeryville. We have funded affordable housing at one of the highest per capita rates for any city in the state's history. We have passed one of the most progressive and productive cannabis taxes. And Ali was the voice that really pushed for us to have the second operator's permit when the city was only going to do one. We had Measure F, which was to fund public safety services and childcare. And we recently had Measure O, which was to make a real property transfer tax more equitable. And while all council members participate and support in those initiatives, Ali and I, from our work outside in our full-time jobs, I had often the production of certain things, and Ali was the on-the-grounds boots and organizer. She organized phone banks and text banks and door knocking and volunteers. And that's what wins campaigns. And Ali really understands how to advance those narratives and those issues. And the city of Emeryville is in a position to do a lot of the things that it's going to do with affordable housing and other resident-based improvements through the finances that were achieved by her efforts. So I want to see you for that. And then I think one of the things that I'm going to always remind me, Allie, is your affinity for riprap and the Point Emery project, and you keeping a commitment to the Parks and Recreation Committee for many years to see that project through. And every Transportation and Public Works Committee meeting we had, when we would do the capital projects update, you would always call on Mike Roberts to give us the annual the monthly riprap update to check on the status of that. And the fact that we were able to complete that project and do something environmentally sustainable and friendly and accessible to the community is, again, just a testament to your willingness to persevere. I look forward to the good work that will be done in San Pablo, and you're never shy of the emotion on leaning in on how to make that street safer. And I hope that someday we'll get to bike that road together. But I just really want to thank you as a colleague, but more importantly, as a friend, as a person who was more than willing to help out when others weren't. You always leaned in, and that will be something that is tremendously missed by your leaving us. So with that, I thank you, and we'll take public comment before we go to the former council member herself. So I'd like to first recognize for 2 minutes, Brian Donahue, please.
Okay, we just heard a lot of fiction. Now let's hear some inconvenient facts about Councilwoman Medina. I paid close attention to her on the council. She did do one good thing I can point to, but let's talk about all the bad stuff she did while she was on our council for 6 years. She was anti-public trees, anti-street trees. Look at the Sherwin-Williams street trees fight and look at her what she did there. Very anti-tree, pro-developer. Anti-bike boulevard, no traffic counts. She never helped to deliver traffic counts for the bike boulevards so we could see to the safety of bicyclists on the bike boulevards. She never rose up and helped out with that, with the traffic counts so we can move the bike boulevard network forward vis-a-vis our general plan. She refused to help. Anti-bike boulevard. Anti-park. During her 6 years in her tenure, Emeryville has gotten worse in terms of acreage of parks versus number of residents as the general plan lays out. So she's made Emeryville worse during her 6 years. It's gotten worse for parks while Ali Medina was on our council. Anti-library. She said she wanted to build a public library, never lifted a finger on that, never even said a word after she got elected. Anti-accountability and transparency. No to the press. She attacks the press, refuses to talk to the press. No to public commenters. She's extremely rude to public commenters. As a matter of fact, you can make a credible argument that she has delivered the culture that the unfortunate culture we now are in, where the vice mayor called me a fuckboy. That's the derivation of that is from Ali Medina, in my opinion. No dissenting voices on committees. She's been pro-developer. No to building ownership. We just talked about instead housing ownership, instead rental.
Thank you so much for your comment.
Very bad.
Thank you for your comment.
Very bad. Thank you.
Okay. And next, please, I'd like to recognize Betsy Cooley for 2 minutes.
I just want to thank you for everything, Allie, and particularly for your support of Point Emery. I can't believe that actually finally happened after all those years. And I'll never be able to forget you, because whenever I go over there, I'll remember that you helped push for it also. And I'd forgotten about the what was it, the ugliest dog contest, or the whatever it was, that contest you had a number of years ago that everybody just loved. It was really the most popular event there, and great idea, and I want to wish you the best for everything. That's it.
Thank you. The next speaker, please, will be, thank you. The next speaker, please, will be wider sidewalks, less parking.
Hi, Ali. I just want to say thank you for everything you've done, and I hope you and your houseplants find a fabulous new home. And yeah, I'm going to miss seeing your houseplants up here too, but it doesn't look like anyone really has any. greenery, so maybe they can work on that. Okay, thanks, bye.
Okay. Seeing no further comments, we will turn to Allie herself. Welcome to unmute and share any parting thoughts or words you have with us, Allie. We need to get Allie unmuted. I wonder if it's because she's a panelist, April, is that why?
I don't think so. Is it's *6, I believe, to unmute yourself on a phone?
I think it's star 9, or is that just to raise the hand? Maybe it's *6. You can try *6, Allie. There you go.
There we go.
Hi, sorry, I did it 4 times. I did *6, I know how this works. Thank you all for the kind words. It's been like a real privilege to work with you all for the last 6 years, probably the highlight of my career in politics. And don't worry, public commentator, many of my house plans are with Mayor Bowders at this moment in time, and I feel completely confident they will be well taken care of in my absence. You know, I'm really proud to have worked for a city that's made significant progress on housing and transportation. I think the work we've done will be realized in the next several years as large transformative projects come in on San Pablo and 40th Street, and hopefully a left turn lane for buses onto the Bay Bridge. I think the amount of housing in the pipeline at all income levels, from market rate to affordable, is something that's going to really transform the city and create that livable, vibrant city that we all wanted so badly. And it's been a pleasure to knock on so many doors for so many campaigns. We have so many great people in Emeryville, and I've gotten to have so many fantastic conversations with members of the public about what we care about and why we're doing this and why we're running this measure and that. And the public's willingness to tax themselves to support a better community around them always amazes and humbles me. And so it's been a real pleasure to do that work. And finally, I think my career highlight is that I got to drive the excavator and toss some riprap into the ocean. So thank you, Mike Roberts and Public Works, for all that. It's been a pleasure and an honor. Bye, guys.
Thanks, Allie. We know we'll see you again. So with that, that will conclude our recognition of our outgoing council member, and we'll move to 4.2, which is our hello, which is our administration of the oath of office to new city manager Paul Budenhagen. And I want to just take this moment before April does the ceremonial component of this to welcome you, Paul, on behalf of the members of the city council to the city of Emeryville. I know you've spent the last few weeks meeting with the department heads and the staff and getting a little orientation and acclimation to what we do here, but you're not from far away. We have the privilege of having stolen you very transparently from the city of Berkeley, where you served as the assistant city manager. And you've got a really amazing resume and the work that you've done there for a number of years now. And I want to just give you the chance before we do the oath of office to give just any welcome remarks or introduction of yourself to the public today that you would like to do before we swear you in.
Thank you very much, Mayor Bowders, and all of the council members. It's really, this is my first day on the job and first meeting, and it's really an honor and a pleasure to serve as your city manager. I come into this work a deeply committed civil servant, public servant, have been doing this work for a long time, and have also lived close by for a long time. I've been on the Emeryville-Oakland border for 21 years and raised my family here. I personally and my family have benefited greatly from the evolution of Emeryville. And just wanted to say to all of you, thank you for entrusting me with the role of city manager. I take it very seriously. I'll be working very hard in partnership with all of you and with the staff and residents to do my part in supporting the work and the vision that you all put forward through your council meetings. So just want to express my gratitude to you all and my great pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you so much. And what I'd like to do is welcome April Richardson, our city clerk, to administer the oath of office to Paul.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mayor. Paul, if you could raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States.
I, Paul Button-Hagan, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
And the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California.
That I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California.
That I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
That I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties
And that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties
upon which I am about to enter as the city manager of the city of Emeryville.
upon which I am about to enter as the city manager for the city of Emeryville.
Thank you.
Thank you, and join me in welcoming Paul. Congratulations. Welcome to our staff. We're excited to have you. And with that, we will move to item 5, which is, Madam Clerk, do we have any announcements of committee or commission vacancies?
Yes, Mayor, wanted to announce that we have moved the next recruitment process up about a month, and we'll be opening a new recruitment on February 17th. Applications will be due April 3rd, and that's scheduled for an April 18th appointment by council.
Thank you, April. And now, council members' announcements of special meetings and attendance. Vice Mayor Welch.
Just that today, Chad and I attended the ribbon cutting for Agenis, just right over here at 6455 Christie. They are a company that produces immunotherapies to help folks fight all types of different cancers. And so it was a wonderful event, well attended, got to meet a lot of their leadership. But I just want to note it's very exciting having an organization like that that is really going to make an impact on cancer treatment here in Emeryville and just right across the street.
Thank you to you and Chad for attending that. Any others with special meetings that you've attended? Seeing none, we'll move to the city manager's report. It'd be really hard to imagine you have one on the first day, but who knows?
I don't have one on the first day, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, though.
Okay, I figured. Thank you so much. Now, ex parte communications. Are there any members who wish to report an ex parte communication for any items on the agenda? No? Okay. So we will move to item 9, which is public comment for items not on the agenda or the consent calendar. A member of the public who wishes to comment on the consent calendar, an item not on the agenda for tonight's meeting, has 2 minutes to do so. And did we receive any written comment cards in advance of tonight's meeting, April?
No, Mayor, we did not.
Okay, I recognize Brian Donahue for 2 minutes, please.
Okay, I would like to make my comments to the new city manager. Now I understand how to pronounce your name, Buddenhagen. Buddenhagen. Thank you for telling me that. I would like to meet with you and just talk with you in private, what city managers have done since I've lived here for 42 years. Just a quick introduction to myself. I've lived in Emeryville for 42 years. My wife and I have a 17-year-old daughter that we've raised here. And she went to Emeryville schools until very recently we transferred her out to Berkeley Unified School District, or Berkeley High School, because the schools here are so atrociously bad. But I would like to speak with you. I'm the editor of the Emeryville Tattler, which you're probably aware, which is a online news site which keeps the 5 of these, the council members, keeps them honest. And I've been doing that for 13 years. And because I'm keeping them honest, they're not fond of me. Who likes to be held to account? Nobody. I've never met a person that likes that. And so the government elite tends to not like me, as the business elite also tend not to like me because I'm shining a spotlight where none is shined here in Emeryville. But I would like to speak with you at your convenience, have a meeting with you. And my first question is why your predecessor put a no trespassing sign on a piece of publicly owned land on 40th Street, right behind City Hall, right to the, on the north side of 40th Street, right to the east of Hollis. And why is that no trespassing sign there? And I would like to get an answer. Your predecessor, Mr. Politzer, refused to answer, and I would like you to investigate that. Find out why the city has a no trespassing sign on our property. Because I keep seeing people standing in amongst the boulders that are there, waiting for a bus. And so I'm sort of inclined to call the police to have them trespass because, you know, it's no trespassing. But yet it seems silly, so they're just waiting for a bus, but yet there we are. So there you go. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other members of the public who wish to comment? Okay, seeing none, public comment is closed. Members, item 10 is the consent calendar. Items 10.1 through 10.13 are the consent items inclusive. Are there any members who wish to comment on a consent item or to pull it for further discussion? Member Mora?
I'd just like to make a brief comment on item 10.7, a resolution of the City Council authorizing the purchase of 2 new Ford Explorer police vehicles not to exceed $113,000. I just had some deep misgivings about the city purchasing new gas-burning internal combustion engine vehicles. Even though these are hybrids, they still burn a lot of gas, and it's the year 2023. I do expect, you know, a city with a reputation on sustainability like Emeryville, we should be more seriously putting together plans for you know, modernizing the fleet and getting an electric vehicle fleet for the police. So that's something I'll come back to as a future agenda item. But I understand these vehicles are needed, and to withhold the funding at this point would leave the police department short on vehicles. So it's something that I'd like to ask the council later to ask staff to look into more seriously.
Anyone else? Thank you for that. So members, the consent calendar, is there any further discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I move approval of the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Thank you. I have a motion by Vice Mayor Welch and a second from Member Mora to approve the consent calendar inclusive of 10.1 through 10.13. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Mora?
Aye.
Councilmember Pryforce?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Welch?
Aye.
And Mayor Bowders?
Aye. Those items have been approved. The motion is passed. There are no public hearings tonight. We move to action items. Item 12.1 is the City Council vacancy, the discussion of the options for the process to fill the vacancy and providing direction to staff. And April, will you be providing this update?
Mayor, I have a short presentation just laying out the options that were in the staff report, if you'd like to see that.
Members, would you like to see the presentation for the item in the staff report, or would you like to wait presentation?
There is no new information in the presentation. It just simply lays out some of the timelines and different things in the staff report that we are looking for.
Okay, does anybody want the presentation? Member Welch?
Mr. Mayor, I think we could go ahead and do the presentation just because we might have members of the public who might have showed up and they didn't see the staff report previously.
Okay, let's go ahead and do that, please. Thank you.
Okay, so we're discussing the options for council to consider and provide direction to staff regarding the council vacancy that exists as of January 16th. General vacancy procedures state that within 60 days of the vacancy, for the city, it would be a deadline of March 16th, 2023, based on former council member Medina resigning on January 15th, 2023. Council must do one of the following. They can call a special election, and that'll be held at the next established regular election, which is established in the election code, or appoint someone to fill the vacancy. So the special election option, the timing for the special election would be November 7th, 2023. That is the next established election date in the elections code. For cost, we're estimating between $138,000 and $152,000, or almost $153,000, and that's based on a $19 to $21 per voter that Alameda County Registrar of Voters charges us to administer the election. The 2021 special election cost was $157,141.18. The term, whether that person is elected or appointed, would be the remainder of the vacated seats term. So the term would go from either the appointment or the election to December 2024. The other option that council can consider is an appointment option. The law doesn't provide specific established guidelines for how to do this, only that the appointment be made within 60 days. So if we're working with a March 16th, 2023 deadline to fill the vacancy, we're recommending that council establish an application period and that they use an application similar to the advisory body application. A 15-day application period from January 7th to February 10th, 2023 would be ample time for people to apply and us to meet the 60-day deadline for council to interview and review and appoint. The application that we're discussing is the advisory body application, and there would be some modifications to it. But the biggest modification would be adding a word-limited statement describing an applicant's experience and education, similar to what elected officials do for a candidate statement. And we actually ask for that for planning commissioners at this point. I think it's a 300-word statement. This would be the appointment timeline, and this was determined simply based on council's regular established meeting schedule. So here we are tonight. We'd like the council to decide what they want to do, and if they want to do an appointment process, then we need to establish an application period and finalize the application. We'd open the application period around January 27th. At the February 7th regular council meeting, council would discuss and decide on an interview format, and then the application period closes. That's the 15 days, the 27th to the 10th. Staff needs a few days to redact the personal information out of the application, and then we would republish that with the republish of the February 21st council agenda with the application materials. February 21st, council would interview the applicants. March 7th is available for continued interviews or appointments for the vacancy. And then if needed, there's a few extra days there to call a special meeting if the appointment has not been made at that point. So what we'd like from council tonight is staff needs some direction. First of all, we want to know if you would like to do a special election for the vacancy, or if you would like to do an appointment. And then if you do decide on an appointment, we'd like to establish the application period. We've made some suggestions in the report, what you'd like to see on the application, and if staff's recommendations are okay with, if you're okay with that. And then start thinking about some types of questions for the interview process so that staff can bring some suggestions back in a staff report for council to review on February 7th. And that is the end of my report. I'm happy to answer questions. I know that John Kennedy and Christy Crowell are both here, and they might be able to answer some more of the technical questions if council has them.
Are there any clarifying questions about the staff report that was presented? Seeing no clarifying questions, we will go to public comment. Members of the public who wish to comment on this item have 2 minutes to do so. April, did you receive any written comment cards in advance of tonight's meeting for this item?
We did not, Mayor.
Okay, please recognize Brian Donahue for 2 minutes.
Okay, well, you've got to go with the democracy option as opposed to the appointment option. I mean, I don't see I have any choice, but also, I realize who the company is I'm speaking to, so I think that you're going to find the democracy option distasteful. But the appointment option is a la the Emory School Board. That's how school board members become school board members, is that the school board people resign before the election and then they appoint one of their friends. And that's why we have the horrible condition we've got at Emory Unified School District. So I implore you, don't go down that path. We need to have democracy. We need to have the people's choice, not Mr. Bowder's choice, which is what it'll be. I mean, maybe choose a good one, but whatever. We want to have democracy. I mean, here I am asking for democracy, expecting not to get it. This city council is infamous for putting yes people on the committees. Nora Davis, Queen Bee Nora Davis, who ran Emeryville for decades, she used to put dissenting voices on our committees. People that had different ideas. That idea is antiquated, it's quaint now. Now it's only people that agree with the council majority ever make it to committees. And so that's sort of the culture here. And there's of course, there's going to be an incumbent advantage. So whoever the council appoints is going to end up getting reelected. So I just implore you, let's have some democracy here. Okay, sure, it's going to cost a lot of money, but we're correct to blame Ali Medina for doing this to us. And it's good to have public anger to be directed at people that do this to us, by the way, not be cavalier about the city council job. So it's good that we have some public anger about that. So we should have to pay, and then that'll teach us to not employ people or hire people like Ali Medina, who has such a cavalier attitude. So I say let's yay for democracy.
Thank you for your comment. Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who wish to comment? Seeing none, public comment is now closed, and we'll turn back for discussion. Members, there are two questions. The first question is, would you prefer to do an election in November, or would you prefer to undertake the process for an appointment to fill the vacancy? And I'll invite members to self-select by raising their hands to let us know what their preference is, and we can take the discussion from there. Mr. Mora?
Yes. So I think I see the $150,000 price tag of a special election. That doesn't strike me as fiscally prudent. We did just have an election, which I would consider the results in that election and the people who ran in that could be one of many factors, and perhaps weighted favorably depending on council members in an appointment process. The appointment application process, I think we'd be looking for a number of qualities, including professional qualifications, skills that could be brought to bear for the city, involvement and commitment to the city. And like I said, having run in the previous election, I would encourage people who had done that to apply, because that shows a level of commitment and drive for the job, and also outreach and support from the community.
Okay, next, I'd like to recognize Vice Mayor Welch.
I think the appointment process is going to be the most cost and time effective. We would be without a fifth council member for basically the entire year. And that is not very good for the functionality of a city council, to be down a council member for almost a 12-month period. So and then also to Councilmember Moore's point, the price tag, us having to pay for a special election, then right before we're going to have to pay for another election. It's back-to-back cost. So I think that it's just the most effective way, noting, yes, democracy is always important, but as far as our timing and the functionality of the council, getting someone in as soon as possible would be best. And there is not an option before November for us to do that. So I would vote for the appointment process.
Okay, thank you for your thoughts. Member Pryforce?
My apologies. My computer died, and so I'm on the phone, so I didn't know how to raise my hand. So hopefully I get this right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I have been contacted, and I'm still, and I have to apologize. I don't really know what's ex parte communication because I'm getting different things, and so I probably need a sit down with John Kennedy because I was told that it's any discussion related to the agenda, or it's like special lobbyists, or I'm not really sure. But what I will say for transparency is that several people interested in the role have contacted me. Sukhdeep Kaur, Brooke Westling, and Brenda Collins. And based upon the conversations that I've had with them in terms of their inquiries into the role, I am leaning towards an appointment, but I also want to stress why the special election might be an option in case things go bad in terms of this appointment process. That Oakland right now is going through its own conflicts, and our supervisors had to meet to address it, and so then they decided to do a recount, and even though historically, typically, the recounts usually just affirm who actually won. The reason why they did it, and I was reading like sort of the comments about it, was because of public trust, and that we want to make sure that how we approach this, especially the appointment process, is a way that that is able to strengthen public trust in our institutions. And so, and I think that that's something that's really important, especially given what Councilmember Mora just shared, that we just had an election. I mean, it's different if it was like maybe a year from November, but it's just still right around the corner. And so the public has chimed in on who they think, if, for example, if Ali Medina had revealed that she was leaving, and it was a three-way race, the public did reveal who they wanted. And I think that that's something that, but however, it's not, nothing's in stone, that it's still up to this process to determine the best person for the role. But my advisement to city staff that in this process is that is considered as part of, when we're talking about interview questions, that is considered in terms of evaluation, that how, those applicants who were voted, whether it's council or school board or whatever, because the three people who I just mentioned were, they received votes in some sort of way, that should be weighed in your evaluation. And as someone who evaluates nonprofit organizations all the time, and to eliminate bias, to make sure that certain organizations that would not be considered are considered, that evaluation and evaluation points, as we just visited with how we evaluate development projects, that how things are weighed is really important, and so that would be my advice. So I am leaning towards an appointment process, and that if the appointment process and somehow betrays the public trust and it's too much of an outcry, then we may have to just pay for a special election in order to restore the public trust that we may have harmed when we went through the appointment process. Thank you.
Okay, so I've heard, Member Moore, I'll get to speak, but I'll call on you again. I've heard three people support the appointment process, and for all the reasons all of you mentioned, I will agree with you that if this were at a different time in the year, it might make more sense. But for, as Member Welch mentioned, 11 months of having 4 people on the council. That causes, that's actually not representative government. The California Government Code, creates councils of a minimum of 5 people for a reason. That's designed to ensure that there's an ample number of people in the decision-making process. Imagine if the council was 1 person, right? That wouldn't really be a council. So when you start thinking about it, 5 was set as a benchmark for a reason, and I don't think going a whole year without what the state law intends us to have as a minimum number of complement on council is advisable. Furthermore, I think that the work that we do, so just to be mindful of the fact that Allie has regional board appointments and committee appointments, and that in the absence of her, we all have to take on additional committees, which has different impacts on each of us and is not necessarily equitable to all of us. And so the ability to have another person who can help lift the weight of the work at the city is critical when you look at the amount of time that would pass. I also, I give a nod to the financial arguments that have been made, although I don't think those are necessarily conclusive in my evaluation. I think that the work of the city and the city to be able to have a fully functioning government as it is intended in the creation of city governments under the California Constitution is what guides my decision to support the appointment in this situation, noting that I would not necessarily support it in every such situation, but I think the facts here merit that. To Member Pryforce's comments, I think was outlined in the staff report that if a decision can't be made or agreed upon within 60 days, then it defaults to an election, right? So there's a safeguard against this going on for months or something like that and not reaching some sort of an agreement. So we have a process that was outlined in the staff report and provided by April this evening in a very clear and succinct manner for us to consider with a timeline. So having heard everybody support the appointment process and answering question 1, we'll turn to question 2, which is, do folks support the timeline that's been proposed? And just to recap that, it showed, I believe it was January 27th to February 10th as the period of time for applications to be submitted. And that those right now is being proposed that be a written statement of a certain maximum number of words, similar to what a candidate statement or other type of statement for a planning commission appointment might look like. Or would you like there to be anything attached to that or in addition to that is one question. And then the other thing is that there was a proposal that we make an agenda item at our February 7th meeting to discuss what the interview questions will be. So there's a group understanding of what the questions will be, because we want to make sure that there's a baseline set of questions that are asked of everybody, right? That the council agrees that there's a set of interview questions we'll ask. And then we can go over the parameters with legal counsel over what additional or follow-up questions can be asked in response to those things in a live interview process. And then if those are confirmed by everybody, then at the meeting on February 15th, we would then conduct interviews. And depending on the number of applicants we have, what I saw April present was that there was a continuation date. So if there was a large number of applicants for some reason, we would be able to conduct some interviews on the 21st and then carry them over to the March 7th meeting, all of which gets us within the 60-day timeline to take action this way if we were going to do that. Is that proposed timeline amenable to everybody, or are there changes to the timeline that people wish to ask about or discuss or propose? Member Mora?
I just wanted to say, it sounds like we're all on the same page about supporting the appointment process via application. And I did think that the calendar staff prepared is quite reasonable and makes sense given the timeline. So I would support a motion, but we should see if there's any more comments.
Yeah, Member Pryforce.
So I understand the process that was presented in terms of that we go into an election if we did not fill the appointment seat. However, like I said, if there is an outcry, if there are petitions that are gathered, if there are people who are knocking on our doors going, what the heck? We don't feel like this reflects what we want, then that has to be adhered to, because it's just too much chaos, and it upsets our flow of things that we want to get done for our city, for us to not adhere to that. And once again, the public trust is really important. So it shouldn't just be that we don't have. The problem is that if the people feel that the appointment is not a reflection of what they want, right? If the appointment somehow taps into some sort of bureaucratic nepotism or cronyism, then yes, then they will, people will be upset, and I think that that's something that we should evaluate, and we should make sure that it doesn't get to that point, because there's a whole lot of things that I'm sure that we all want to get done, and the last thing we want is for a whole lot of eyes to be on the city of Emeryville, just like it is with Oakland when it comes to our election process and how we view and practice democracy. Thank you.
Member Moore, do you have another comment? I saw your hand go up.
I guess I just wanted to briefly speak to the point Member Pryforce was bringing up. I think we're trying to be decisive here and fill get another council member in a certain time frame. And it sounds like he's suggesting that the decision would or could be revisited if, I guess, I don't know how many people, see, it takes more than 5 people to cause us to reconsider the decision if you're claiming, that's democracy, right? So maybe if the 1,500 people or so who, maybe elected somebody, if those people show up, then maybe the decision could be revisited. But I don't think it would be prudent to formalize that notion here.
So just to be clear, Mr. City Attorney, the process here is that if we pursue the appointment and we reach a decision and a majority votes in favor of a candidate, the person is sworn into the city council position, correct?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, can you repeat that question again?
If we pursue the appointment process and we interview candidates, and at the conclusion of interviewing candidates, a majority of the city council members present select for appointment a candidate to be appointed, and the person is appointed, they are sworn in and they are a council member at that time. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. So just to be clear about and transparent about the process, the process is inclusive up to the time of a decision. The process is not a process that gets a second bite at the apple after it's concluded, in the sense that there's a revisiting to the process. That's a term I heard, and I just want to Member Morris' question, just clarify that. Vice Mayor Welch, your hand is next.
I had a clarifying question, and then kind of just another question that wasn't answered in the original presentation. The clarifying question is, during these special meetings where we are interviewing and moving to make the appointment, because that is an action item, the public would then be able to comment on that, correct?
Yes, it's like any other item, the public comments, yes.
That's what I figured. So people can say if they prefer one candidate or over the other, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so the public would then be able to comment even on the appointment process at that time. So I just wanted to make sure I understood that, and that was clarified, that the public will still be included in the appointment process and would be able to comment on the potential appointees. My second clarifying question for Madam Clerk, I know we're establishing the timeline tonight, but is there, I guess for lack of a better term, a marketing period where that has been established, where it is promoted that there is an appointment process that's going to happen? Has that timeline been established?
Honestly, no, Vice Mayor Welch, but I mean, we could start tomorrow putting something out saying that the appointment process will open on January 27th. We have not changed the current advisory body application at all, so that needs to be reworked. That's the reason we can't open it tomorrow. We need a couple days to be able to edit and do things, but we can certainly start advertising that when the application period is, and when it will start up on the website and a news flash and social media as of tomorrow.
Wonderful, thank you. I just want to give people ample time to prepare to submit the application and make sure they have there's a nice space in between the announcement and then the application period opening and then closing. But thank you.
Okay, Member Pryforce.
Yeah, so, and thank you, Councilmember Welch, for your suggestion about marketing and to emphasize that the public can make comments on these items. And all this is great. However, I do want to emphasize that that if we through this appointment process choose someone who the public disagrees with largely, and the idea of 1,500 on a petition, when it didn't take that much for us to even to come up with our petition when we decided to run for office, if we're going to be fair and equitable, that if the public, if there's a public outcry around this, then it's something that we need to take into consideration. So as we're evaluating candidates, we need to keep this in mind. And so the public comments, yes, we need to keep that in mind. However, we also want to make sure that that the appointment is something that is someone who reflects who reflects the public and what the public decides in a way that feels to them that a special election was not needed. And so if they feel that a special election is needed, then we need to also factor in what it would take for us to decide that a special election would be needed. And I think that that's something that needs to happen, because I think that right now, what has been drawn out is that a special election is only needed if we haven't filled the spot. And what I'm saying is that the special election may be needed if the public feels that they did not that the person who we choose or this process was undemocratic for them, or that it wasn't a very inclusive process. So that is something that yeah, that's what I would that's what I would suggest.
Okay, Vice Mayor Welch.
What's the action on this item? Is it moving? Is it moving to approve the staff suggestion?
It would be two steps. One, to make a motion to appoint, to pursue a process to appoint to fill the council vacancy, and the second would be by staff.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, you had broke up for a moment. Would be two different resolutions or two different motions. One
you can do it in one motion.
Approve. Okay, what was the final part? You had broken up, and I think I apologize.
I apologize. I have my family sending me text messages on my phone, and it's jamming my phone. They're all showing me baby pictures, and that's not really helping my feed right now here. So let me just clarify. You can make one motion that that says that you'd like to have the staff recommendation be approved, which is to have an appointment for the vacancy and to pursue the timeline as proposed in the staff report, and that would be a sufficient motion.
Okay, so I move to approve the staff's recommendation to pursue an appointment process and approval of the staff recommended timeline.
I second.
There's a motion by Vice Mayor Welch and a second by Member Mora to fill the council vacancy with an appointment and pursue the timeline for an application and interview process as proposed in the staff report. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Mora?
Aye.
Councilmember Pryforce?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Welch?
Aye.
And Mayor Bowders?
Aye. The ayes have it. The motion carries, and that is the process we will undertake. Thank you, members. Item 12.2 is a resolution of the City Council of the City of Emeryville making the required findings to allow for the continuation of remotely held meetings under AB 361. Members, before we discuss this, I just want to share with the public that, and as a reminder to ourselves, that when we discussed this item previously, we had agreed that in February, at the clerk's request, we would come back to do in-person meetings at our next meeting. But we are passing this resolution for a couple of reasons. One, the governor's state of emergency doesn't expire till the end of February, and this will afford our local committees and commissions to continue those remote meetings while additional technology is set up to assist them in the transition to the March 1st period. But we wanted to have our meetings begin back in person so that we could test the council room equipment and video stuff, so that when we're obligated to go live in March, we don't have any glitches or problems that would prevent us from holding a publicly noticed meeting properly. Okay, so with the resolution being passed, I just want to remind folks that the council meeting will be an in-person meeting with remote access for people who wish to join by Zoom at the February 7th meeting. So with that understanding, is there any questions before I go to public comment about the resolution? It's the regular resolution. Okay, seeing none, now is the time for public comment. A member of the public who wishes to comment on the AB 361 resolution, have 1 minute to do so. April, did you receive any written comment cards for this item?
I did not, Mayor.
Okay, public comment is Brian Donahue will get 1 minute to speak, please.
Emeryville's bucking to be the last city in the Bay Area to have non-hybridized or non-publicly available meetings. Shame on us. So, of course, when you invite the public to be able to come to a meeting, that's pure democracy. Like old people, people with disabilities have a hard time with Zoom and what have you. Plus all the other problems with Zoom that we've seen here tonight, but the city doesn't care about that. This body doesn't care about that. What they care about is continuing on as you are, and that was really shown us in the decision you just made to not have democracy, to have an appointment to the city council. You guys are just not fans of democracy, and I understand it's because you're in power, but it's a very cynical worldview, and we want to have democracy here in Emeryville, and that's what we like, and we got a guy like Kalima Pryforce who's very independent. We got him by democracy. A guy like him would never be.
Thank you so much for your comment. Are there any other members of the public who wish to comment on item 12.2? Okay, seeing none, public comment is closed, and I'll bring it back for discussion. Is there any comment on the motion or the resolution? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I move approval of the resolution.
I second.
Thank you. A motion by Vice Mayor Welch, seconded by Member Mora to approve this resolution. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Mora?
Aye.
Councilmember Pryforce?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Welch?
Aye.
And Mayor Bowders?
Aye. Thank you. The motion passes. The resolution is approved. Item 13 is the department head reports. Mr. City Manager, do we have any department heads that wish to report this evening?
We do not, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, department head reports are done. Future agenda item requests from council members. Is there a council member who wishes to request the scheduling of a future agenda item? Councilmember Mora?
Yeah, I would like us to take up the issue or topic of laying out a timeline and a practical path forward to electrifying the city fleet, in particular the police vehicles, which, just in terms of miles driven and gas burned are, I imagine, the lion's share.
Thank you. Is this an item that you'd be amenable to having referred to the Sustainability or Public Safety Committee? I think sustainability, if it's the whole fleet, that's the place where you could bring a staff presentation on this and then bring a recommendation to council. Is that amenable to you?
Would public safety, I do want to work, I want the police to be involved in that discussion. Would public safety make more sense? What do you suggest?
The police can come and, it's up to you. It's, I don't know the situation with the fleet. We could leave it that it goes to either, and it's, you have a discussion with staff. I believe most of the fleet, except the police department, is electrified already. So I don't it may be that you wish to have it only at public safety, but if there is a broader issue you want to discuss, that kind of issue is typically
I think we
discussed its sustainability excluded from participating there.
Yeah, I think public safety makes more sense because the focus is the police vehicles.
Okay, there's a request to refer Councilmember Moore's request to discuss electrification of the police fleet to Public Safety Committee. Is there a majority here who supports that recommendation? Please give me a thumbs up if you do. Okay, I see a unanimous vote of hands. So your request is sent to the Public Safety Committee, and the secretary of that committee will work with you to get that on an agenda. Okay, the next council member to recognize is Member Pryforce.
Sorry. So figure out this phone thing. Yeah, it's based on a whole lot of public pressure that I've been receiving. I would like to add an item to a future agenda related to forming a code of ethics for the city of Emeryville, particularly as it relates to the city council, and perhaps using Oakland and Berkeley and our regional cities as sort of a roadmap towards achieving.
Yep, that's already been referred to the Budget and Governance Committee. It's on a working agenda, and it didn't get taken up in the fall because the city manager who staffs the committee retired. So it is on the agenda for this year. Okay. Anybody else? No? Okay. So seeing no additional future agenda item requests, Madam Clerk, the time is 8:43. This meeting is adjourned. I wish everybody a lovely evening and a nice week.